Chapter 1181. What's going on? Gu Xingyin couldn't help but curse in her heart. But at this time, no matter how much she wanted to curse, she had to endure this lightning tribulation first. Another pitch-black wound appeared on his body, which was already riddled with scars. Gu Xingyin felt that she didn't even have the strength to stand up. The lightning tribulations were always more powerful than the last. In the later stages, the power of each lightning tribulation would increase exponentially. Gu Xingyin didn't have the time to think about why there were more than 54 lightning tribulations. She could only numbly circulate the remaining spiritual energy in her body, trying her best to resist the lightning tribulations that mercilessly struck her body. And the ghosts watching from afar at the foot of the mountain were completely stunned. Originally, when they saw that Gu Xingyin had successfully passed the 6-9 lightning tribulation, before they could even cheer, they were caught off guard by the situation that followed. Wasn't it the 6-9 lightning tribulation? Why wasn't it over yet? It wasn't until a few more lightning tribulations struck that some of the more quick-witted people turned to look at Gu Xingyin. Lord Lanling, it seems like she can't hold on much longer. Jin was so anxious that her eyes were red. Wasn't it the 6-9 lightning tribulation? Now it's already 60. Why isn't it over yet? She pulled an elder from the Lanling domain beside her and asked. That elder also shook his head with a pale face. He also didn't know why Lord Lanling would encounter such a thing. The most helpless thing was that they couldn't help at all in such a situation. They could only look anxiously and futilely at Gu Xingyin, secretly hoping that their ghost king could hold on. But even Jin, whose cultivation was not high enough, could see that Gu Xingyin was already an arrow at the end of its flight. And in the sky, the dark rolling thunder clouds showed no signs of dissipating. Gu Xingyin looked at the black tribulation clouds in the sky with some despair. Dark purple lightning flashed in the clouds, making rumbling sounds. It's over now. I'm afraid I'll be the first to be struck to death by lightning, the mission enforcer said. At this time, there was almost no part of her body that was intact. Her dantian was also empty. The stinging pain from the wounds on her body was mixed with the feeling of weakness due to the exhaustion of her strength. At this moment, she just wanted to close her eyes and lie down without caring about anything else. He was really tired. As she thought of this, the last trace of spiritual power that she had gathered in her palm completely dissipated. In any case, based on his current situation, he definitely wouldn't be able to survive the next tribulation lightning. Gu Xingyin only glanced at the purple lightning that was rapidly forming in the dark thunderclouds, before allowing it to strike down towards her. Fortunately, she didn't agree to Feng Lin's request. She thought that if she was with him and encountered such a thing, how sad would Feng Lin be? Fortunately, there was nothing between the two of them now. At most, he would be sad for a while, and then he would be able to recover. Just as she closed her eyes, a loud and clear cry suddenly entered her ears. That cry was like the sound of jade, like the sound of a spring. Gu Xingyin even saw that the places on her body that were constantly bleeding due to the lightning sea had already healed and formed scabs in an instant. The cry of the phoenix was rumored to be able to revive the dead. Even if it was exaggerated, the cry of the phoenix was really effective on external injuries. Chapter 1182. Gu Xingyin opened his eyes, and as soon as he turned his head, he saw a sea of red that was as red as fire filling his vision. The phoenix, whose entire body was burning with raging flames, recklessly crashed into the lightning tribulation, using its own body to withstand the lightning tribulation that fell on Gu Xingyin's body. Gu Xingyin watched as the phoenix raised its beautiful neck and opened its mouth to let out a high-pitched cry. Gu Xingyin's heart tightened. The lightning tribulation had never allowed others to help. If a second person entered the range of the lightning tribulation, then the power of the lightning tribulation would increase by several times in an instant. Even if Feng Lin's strength was so strong that even Gu Xingyin couldn't see it clearly, could he really withstand this obviously abnormal lightning tribulation? A breeze blew past, and the phoenix that was still in midair instantly turned into its human form and returned to Gu Xingyin's side. You shouldn't have come. Gu Xingyin looked at him seriously. Feng Lin's expression was rarely serious. If I didn't come, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Gu Xingyin shook her head gently. But if you came, you might die. Feng Lin suddenly smiled. He reached out and grabbed Gu Xingyin's hands that were still stained with blood. Ignoring the stains on them, he brought them to his mouth and kissed them gently. If I can be buried under this lightning tribulation with you, it would be a good ending. He kissed Gu Xingyin's pale face with some heartache. This time, Gu Xingyin didn't refuse him. You go and stay here. Leave this to me. Gu Xingyin didn't refuse. In her current physical condition, if she insisted on being brave, it would only cause trouble for Feng Lin. Feng Lin stood with his back facing her. The strong wind blew his fiery red robe until it fluttered. The black clouds in the sky rolled and roared angrily, as if they wanted to teach this intruder a bloody lesson. Looking up at the powerful lightning tribulation above, Feng Lin suddenly turned back with a smile. Lan Ling, if we are lucky enough to survive this time, are you willing to be my partner? Gu Xingyin nodded gently. Then, she watched as the man was drowned in lightning. 62, 63, 64. The man was still dressed in fiery red clothes, but his face was even paler. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked coldly at the sky. The heavenly Tao is ruthless because it is fair. Then, today, I, Lan Ling, will ask this question in front of the lightning tribulation. Is the heavenly Tao is unfair to me? Boom! In response to her question was a lightning tribulation was even more powerful than the previous lightning tribulation. With such a momentum, even if she was at full strength, she wouldn't be able to take this blow. Gu Xingyin subconsciously looked at Feng Lin, only to see Feng Lin standing tall amidst the tribulation clouds. It was Feng of the lightning tribulation of the clouds the heavens, the of the lightning tribulation of the lightning tribulation clouds. This was the last scene she saw before she fainted. When she woke up again, Gu Xingyin felt that her whole body was full of spiritual energy, and her strength seemed to be much stronger than before. But she wasn't in the mood to care about this. She opened her eyes and looked around. What entered her eyes was a magnificent sight. Everything she saw was exquisite and gorgeous. She didn't see the person she wanted to see. System? Gu Xingyin had many doubts in her heart. The system said, "Host, your mission didn't fail, and Feng Lin is fine." Hearing this, her heart was relieved. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but ask, "What happened?" Chapter 1183. The system briefly explained. It turned out that the thunder tribulation that Gu Xingyin experienced was not the 69 heavenly tribulations that should have appeared when the Ghost Lord broke through, but the 99 heavenly tribulations that could only appear when the Ghost Lord broke through. Gu Xingyin was relieved when she heard this. No wonder. With her current strength, she could not survive the 99 heavenly tribulations. She could not help but think of Feng Lin again. How did he survive the 99 heavenly tribulations in the end? Why did the plot deviate this time? In the original plot, what Ghost Lord Lan Ling experienced was indeed the 69 heavenly tribulations. The answer given by the system made Gu Xingyin speechless. The system said, "Host, your last few words when you questioned the way of heaven worked." Gu Xingyin's eyes widened. The system transmitted a memory to her mind. It was during the tribulation. When the lightning was about to strike Feng Lin, Gu Xingyin's question appeared, and the lightning tribulation strangely paused for a moment. Then, everything seemed to be still. The thunder tribulation hung dangerously above Feng Lin's head, and finally dissipated directly. At the same time, a golden ray of light pierced through the clouds and landed on the bodies of the two men who were riddled with wounds. Not only were their injuries completely healed, but they even received a gift that they could not get during the tribulation. The way of heaven was compensating them for what they had done wrong. Then the point was, why did I have the 99 heavenly tribulations? Gu Xingyin asked the key question. To be honest, if Feng Lin had not come at the critical moment, she would have been buried in the thunder tribulation. The system replied, "The way of heaven made a mistake in judgment and judged your strength to be one level higher." Gu Xingyin was surprised. How could this be? How could the way of heaven make a mistake? The system said, "Under the divine court, the highest thunder tribulation is the 99 heavenly tribulations. Host, according to the strength of your divine soul, if it were not for the fact that this world can only withstand the 99 heavenly tribulations at most, it would be far more than that. Gu Shengyin was shocked. I remember that the strength is determined according to the potential and cultivation level. When did it look at the divine soul? The system replied straightforwardly, so, the heavenly axiom made a mistake this time. Gu Shengyin thought for a moment and asked, will the heavenly Tao just casually compensate us? She was unconvinced in her heart. She had almost lost her life, and this was completely the fault of the heavenly Tao. She was extremely resentful in her heart. The system replied, no, host. The heavenly Tao will be severely punished, more severely than you know. Gu Shengyin narrowed her eyes. How do you know? The system replied, the host does not have sufficient authority to inquire about the above questions. Gu Shengyin, you whet her appetite but don't solve it. Whenever it comes to a crucial point, you always play dumb. System, you can do it. She knew the system's temperament. If it didn't want to say something, no matter what she did, the system wouldn't say it. She could only change the topic. Where is this place? Where is Feng Lin? In fact, she wanted to ask this question immediately, but she was afraid that she would get a bad answer, so she held back. Now that she knew that Feng Lin was safe, Gu Shengyin dared to ask with confidence. This is the territory of the Phoenix God clan in the far west of the Divine Court. Gu Shengyin's eyes widened. Wasn't this Feng Lin's hometown? Lan Ling, you're awake? A gentle voice came from outside the hall. Chapter 1184. Gu Shengyin raised her head and saw a man in a fiery red robe walking in with a smile on his face. Gu Shengyin immediately sensed his aura. Very good, after going through a lightning tribulation, this man seemed to be more and more unfathomable. Moreover, as the system said, the way of heaven had compensated the two of them. At least at this moment, Gu Shengyin didn't notice any injuries on Feng Lin's body. She took a few steps forward and walked to Feng Lin's side. You brought me to the Divine Court? Feng Lin smiled and took her hand. Yes. At that time, I saw that you had been unconscious and was worried about leaving you alone in the yin and yang world, so I took the initiative to bring you to my side. He looked at Gu Shengyin quietly, lowering her eyes and not speaking, and thought that she was unhappy. He said softly, Lan Ling, I want to ask, under that lightning, do your words still count? That sentence, Gu Shengyin thought of the scene when he confessed to her. With the lightning in the sky as a companion, such a scene was novel and romantic enough. She raised her eyebrows and smiled, and there seemed to be fine starlight falling from the bottom of her eyes. I, Lan Ling, naturally do what I say. I never know what it means to go back on my words. A smile spread on Feng Lin's face. Gu Shengyin's words undoubtedly admitted her attitude in disguise. He looked at Gu Shengyin's calm expression, but her ears were a little red. He only felt that her character was really cute. He suddenly thought of something and asked Gu Shengyin, do you still have the feather I gave you with my name engraved on it? Gu Shengyin took out the feather that had always maintained a golden red color and faint flames from the storage ring. Seeing this, Feng Lin smiled and said, Lan Ling, you are still so confident in keeping it. Obviously, you have feelings for me before. Gu Shengyin glanced at him sideways. Come on, I just think that the phoenix's feather is a good thing. There's no need to waste it. Feng Lin chuckled. Okay. However, this is indeed a good thing. He slowly explained this rule of the Phoenix clan to Gu Shengyin. It was rare for Gu Shengyin to crack a joke with him. Good for you. It turns out that you've been eyeing me since so early on. Feng Lin pulled her into his arms. I've told you so many times that I fell in love with you at first sight, but you didn't believe me. Let's go. I'll take you to see the famous Phoenix Forest of our Phoenix clan in the Three Realms. Feng Lin held Gu Shengyin's hand and walked forward. Along the way, he naturally asked Gu Shengyin about the lightning tribulation. This kind of thing was not something that Lan Ling could know. Gu Shengyin could only say that she didn't know either. Seeing this, Feng Lin did not ask further. What happened to Gu Xingyin this time was simply unheard of. During the time when Gu Xingyin was in a coma, he also specially went to consult the elders of the Phoenix clan, but he did not get any useful results. Presumably, Lan Ling, who had just woken up, would not know. This was what Feng Lin thought in his heart. The two came to a place. From the outside, Gu Xingyin could only see a white fog-like scene. However, Feng Lin held her hand and walked directly into the white fog. As soon as they stepped into the white fog, the scene in front of Gu Xingyin changed dramatically. She widened her eyes and looked at the beautiful scenery in front of her with amazement. Chapter 1185. All she could see was a blazing red. Countless giant trees surrounded by translucent flames appeared in her line of sight. Those trees had white jade-like branches, but their leaves seemed to be the most gorgeous and translucent jade in the world. Such a passionate color seemed to want to release all the beauty of her life in this moment, even if she would enter eternal decay in the next moment. However, Gu Xingyin knew that they would not wither. The phoenix wood was a divine wood unique to the Phoenix clan. If it was not damaged by external forces, it could last for 10,000 years. She couldn't help but walk forward. When she reached under a phoenix tree, she reached out and gently touched the leaf that was wrapped around by the raging flame flash. As expected, there was no burning pain. Instead, it was warm and comfortable. Feng Lin did not follow her forward. Instead, he stood where he was and looked at the tree and ghost not far away. The phoenix wood was flamboyant and gorgeous, but it could not steal the elegance of the person under the tree. From the first time Feng Lin saw Gu Xingyin, he felt that it was a pity that this woman did not become a phoenix. Gu Xingyin seemed to have sensed something and turned to look at him. Sporadic leaves fell from the phoenix wood. It was more gorgeous and shocking than any rain of flowers in the world. And the woman in the rain of flowers looked back and smiled, capturing his gaze. Feng Lin suddenly had an impulse that he had never had before. He walked forward and pulled Gu Xingyin into his arms under her slightly puzzled gaze. His heart was beating so fast. This was Gu Xingyin's most intuitive feeling. Then, she felt something warm gently cover her eyes. It was very light and gentle, making it easy for people to feel the other party's love and pity. That warmth gradually rolled down, from her eyelids to her nose, to her cheeks, and finally to her slightly opened lips. This was a very gentle kiss, which was very different from the feeling that Feng Lin usually gave people. Gu Xingyin quietly felt this man's unique gentleness. Lan Ling, Lan Ling. He called her in a low voice. Every time he called out, Gu Xingyin softly hummed in acknowledgement. In this unique forest of phoenixes, Feng Lin carried Gu Xingyin like a child. The two of them hugged each other and spun around quietly in this deserted world. When they were tired, Gu Xingyin quietly closed his eyes and leaned into Feng Lin's arms. Feng Lin hugged the sleeping woman in his arms as if he was hugging the whole world. On this trip to the divine court, the two of them seemed to have tacitly agreed to something. Feng Lin brought Gu Xingyin to meet the elders of the Phoenix clan. As expected, they received the same blessings. In fact, the Phoenix clan was far of nature's eyes, of the world's eyes. Most importantly, this clan was famous for its beauty. From the elders of the clan to the newly born phoenix cubs, without exception, all of them were obsessed with looks. Gu Xingyin's SSS was rare even in the Phoenix clan. She easily captured the hearts of all the phoenixes. After all, Gu Xingyin was not a god yet. It was not good for her to live in the divine court for a long time. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with her, Feng Lin sent her back to the Lan Ling region. Lan Ling, wait for me. I'll go to the clan to make some preparations. I'll definitely bring you a grand proposal. Feng Lin looked into Gu Xingyin's eyes and said seriously. Chapter 1186. Gu Xingyin agreed. However, before Feng Lin could propose, she received the decree of the divine court. The mighty thunder tribulation she experienced not only shocked the entire Lanling region, but also the divine court. The divine court also investigated it, but in the end, they didn't find out the reason for the abnormality of the tribulation thunder. However, Gu Xingyin, a ghost cultivator who caused the abnormality, attracted the attention of the divine court. They also found out about her deeds over the years and learned about her realm, so the decree of the divine court was naturally issued. Watching the messenger from the divine court leave on a cloud, Gu Xingyin stroked the decree in her hand, feeling very calm. In fact, whether she was conferred or not, it didn't affect Ghost King Lanling's life. She was still the king in charge of the Lanling region, but it had become officially recognized by the divine court. Perhaps there was one more thing. The current Ghost King Lanling, no, it should be said that Lord Lanling was also a figure with a background. At least if someone wanted to attack the Lanling region in the future, they had to consider whether this action would arouse the anger of the divine court. 3 months after the decree of the divine court was issued, Gu Xingyin heard Jin's exclamation during an afternoon nap. She walked out of the hall door and looked up to see a scene that made people stop breathing. The hazy and gray sky above the Lanling region was lit up by countless fiery red lights. Several fiery red phoenixes with long and gorgeous tail feathers danced in the sky, silently performing a dazzling dance. The phoenix in the middle was the most familiar to Gu Xingyin. It was Feng Lin. Seeing her figure, Feng Lin's eyes lit up. Then he raised his neck high, and the crisp sound of a phoenix came into the ears of all the ghosts. Even if no one could tell what the sound meant, they could feel the meaning of the sound. This phoenix was seeking a mate. It was said that the most common ceremony of a phoenix seeking a mate was the phoenix dance. The most gorgeous dance of a male phoenix's life must be the one he danced for his mate. Everyone was shocked by this scene. Their eyes, ears, and minds were occupied by the dance and the long cry. How could there be such a beautiful dance in this world? Such a pleasant sound? How happy would a woman be to be proposed to like this? Gu Xingyin stood quietly on the spot, watching the phoenix fall from the sky to her side. Everyone watched the gorgeous phoenix fly around their Lord Lanling 3 times, and then turn into a familiar figure. Feng Lin gently held her hand, and a fiery red jade token appeared in his palm. This is my natal spirit tablet. Lanling, are you willing to be its keeper? The holder of the life token could know his whereabouts and status at any time. Giving the token was the same as spreading oneself in front of that person. The Lord Lanling. The Lord Lanling. The Jade Lanling, Lord's hands. Lord Lanling. She stretched out her hand, but she didn't take the jade tablet. Instead, she closed his palm. She took Lanling's fee feather was Feng's Lanling, Lord Lanling. Lanlings, I already have this, don't I? She said with a smile. Feng Lin's heart, which had been suspended because of her actions just now, finally relaxed. He then spoke of his purpose today. The Phoenix clan only has one partner in their life. They will rely on each other for a lifetime and will not abandon each other in life and death. Lanling, are you willing to be my partner? Chapter 1187. Of course. Under everyone's gaze, Gu Xingyin gave her answer. The grandest ceremony of the Phoenix clan was the once-in-a-lifetime proposal ceremony. As for the wedding, the Lanling region said, since you made the proposal so grand, we must get back at you for the wedding. So, the matter was settled. The wedding of the two would be held in the yin-yang world of the Lanling region. Jin and Weiwei, who had found their true love, rubbed their palms together and said, we must hold a grand wedding ceremony so that the phoenixes won't look down on the Lanling region. Gu Xingyin looked at her subordinates, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. After thinking about it, she still didn't have the heart to tell them that the Phoenix clan cared about the proposal the most. If the other party agreed to be partners, the ceremony would be completed. In other words, the Phoenix clan didn't care about the wedding. But since her subordinates were so enthusiastic, she didn't want to dampen their enthusiasm. Moreover, the wedding was not just for the phoenixes. She still valued her wedding very much. So when Feng Lin asked in confusion what the Lanling region was preparing for this period of time, Gu Xingyin was in a good mood and said that they were preparing for the wedding. Feng Lin was surprised for a moment. Gu Xingyin had a bad idea. She leaned close to Feng Lin's ear and whispered, "You gave me such a shocking proposal. I should return the favor with a grand wedding. Feng Lin nodded in realization. So that's how it was. But he felt that something was wrong. Gu Xingyin snickered. The poor phoenix didn't know that in the eyes of the human world and the other clans in the divine court, whoever held the wedding was the one who proposed. So thousands of years later, no matter what Feng Lin thought, many immortals and gods only knew that in order to marry immortal Feng Lin of the Phoenix God clan, immortal Lan Ling held an extremely grand wedding ceremony in the three realms. When Feng Lin knew the meaning of this, everyone in the three realms had already known about it. What could Feng Lin do? He didn't care about this reputation, but it didn't stop him from using this matter to get some benefits from Gu Xingyin. Of course, the relationship between husband and wife could only be achieved through certain harmonious matters. The next day, Feng Lin, who was refreshed, went out with a beaming face. It didn't matter who was going to marry her. What mattered was who was going to get the most benefits, wasn't it? Gu Xingyin gritted her teeth and said, "Who are they?" It was such a long time ago, yet they were still gossiping. Whether it was the phoenix, who was born as a god, or Gu Xingyin, who was conferred the title of true lord, both of them had long lifespans. During their free time, the two of them would pretend to be an ordinary married couple and wander around the various corners of the three dimensions to experience a different life. Until the 5 decay of the celestial being arrived. Gu Xingyin could clearly feel that her body was slowly aging, and the spiritual power in her body was also slowly draining away. She didn't have long to live. Feng Lin also knew. However, neither of them revealed this matter. The two of them continued to play until the end of their lifespan. In the end, she could not hold on any longer. Feng Lin, I am very happy in this life, Gu Xingyin said to Feng Lin with a smile on her face. Due to her weak body, she put on a thick cloak. Her long black hair was gray and mottled, just like this body. She had reached the end of her life. Chapter 1188. Something flashed in Feng Lin's eyes. But he didn't care. He just looked at the woman beside him greedily. He couldn't even bear to blink. His throat was slightly dry. I'm also very happy. Gu Xingyin reached out her hands that were no longer moist to touch Feng Lin's face. So you have to smile, Feng Lin. Don't feel sad. Didn't we agree? We will be together forever. I'm just leaving first. I will wait for you. In the next life, we will still be together. Hearing these last words, Feng Lin's emotions that had been suppressed finally collapsed. He gently hugged Gu Xingyin tightly in his arms. This person was too fragile now. He didn't even dare to use too much strength because he was afraid that she couldn't bear it and would hurt. In a place where Gu Xingyin couldn't see, some warm liquid fell on her cloak. I'm not sad, I'm not sad. He didn't know if he wanted to convince her or himself. But Gu Xingyin couldn't see. How could she not hear his suppressed hoarse voice? She could only use all her strength to hug his body. I love you, Feng Lin. This was something that Lan Ling had never said to Feng Lin in her life. Feng Lin had spent thousands of years to say this sentence, but he couldn't pry open Gu Xingyin's mouth. But if he had to hear it at the last moment of her life, Feng Lin would rather not hear it for the rest of his life. The hand that grabbed his clothes gradually lost strength. Feng Lin could clearly feel that the breath of the person in his arms weakened. Lan Ling? He called softly, as if he was afraid that he would scare her if he was too loud. N. Gu Xingyin responded softly and didn't say anything else. After a long time, there was an uncontrollable sobbing sound in this deserted land. If someone was here, they would be able to hear that this sobbing sound was like the wailing of a beast that had lost its partner. The wind stopped quietly, afraid to disturb the man who had just lost his love. The person in his arms seemed to have moved. Feng Lin quickly looked up. However, this one glance caused his eyes to almost pop out of their sockets. The figure of his beloved in his arms was slowly becoming transparent. That's right, even if she had become a deity, she was still a ghost cultivator. Ghost cultivators did not have physical bodies, only spiritual bodies. Once the main body died, the spirit body would naturally dissipate from this world. No, Lan Ling, there must be a way. Feng Lin's expression was a little crazy. He even tried to inject his spiritual power into this body that had lost its vitality to protect her body. But it was all in vain. He watched helplessly as the person in his arms turned into specks of starlight, losing all traces of her in this world before his eyes. He remained in a daze as he knelt on the spot. If someone passed by here, they would see a red-clothed man kneeling in front of a few pieces of clothing with a dazed expression on his face for several days. All the way until 10 days later, Feng Lin finally had a trace of reaction. He raised his right hand and a red light flew out from his palm toward the Phoenix clan in the 9 heavens. He gently picked up the clothes on the ground one by one and carefully put them on in order, as if they were still on a person's body. Then, he gently hugged them in his arms. His posture was sincere, as if he was holding the most important treasure in his life. An illusory red flame ignited from his body. Lan Ling, I said that I would never abandon you in life and death. Feng Lin is here to accompany you. Chapter 1189. A long time ago, in this region known as Lan Ling, there was a Lan Ling ancient country. The eldest princess of the Lan Ling ancient country was the most beautiful girl in the country and was also blessed by the sorcerer god. Her eyes were as clear as the dew of early spring and her smile was even more mesmerizing than the most beautiful flower in the country. People said that the eldest princess was the pearl that the sorcerer god gave to the Lan Ling ancient country. She grew up without any worries and thought that she could live a carefree life. But war came. In that era, there were many wars between the small countries. To fight for treasures, slaves, beauties, land, any item was enough to be a reason to start a war. The neighboring Jia country started a war against the Lan Ling country. Moreover, the Lan Ling country was on the decline. The generals of the Lan Ling country died on the battlefield and the people of the Lan Ling country faced the danger of being massacred. The eldest princess's father even wrote a will. Once the imperial city was broken, as the king, there was only one ending for him. If he didn't want to live in humiliation, he could only choose to die. Before that, he had arranged for his confidant to escort his beloved daughter out. But the eldest princess didn't accept such an arrangement. When no one had time to care about her, she ran to the priest palace of the Lan Ling country. There were a few witches praying quietly in the palace. This was the only quiet place in the Lan Ling country. The eldest princess walked into the main hall as usual. As a witch favored by the sorcerer god, she was supposed to become the great witch of the Lan Ling country and represent the sorcerer god to protect the country. Everyone, are you willing to protect the Lan Ling country with me for the last time? No one rejected. Under such a situation, personal benefits were so insignificant. The eldest princess and the witches used themselves as a sacrifice to awaken the power of the sorcerer god. The Jia country soldiers who were attacking the Lan Ling imperial city were attacked by an invisible attack. In the eyes of the Lan Ling country soldiers, they were like sand dunes that were blown by a strong wind and instantly turned to dust. The crisis of the Lan Ling country ended. The price was the lives of the eldest princess and her witches. Their souls were trapped and could never be reincarnated. The people of the Lan Ling country remembered the kindness of the eldest princess and the witches. They all set up memorial tablets in their homes to worship them. The faith from the people of the country nourished the soul that should have dissipated between heaven and earth. Several thousand years had passed, and the Lan Ling ancient kingdom had long been destroyed by the wind and sand. It had become a kingdom that only existed in legends. As for the eldest princess who had sacrificed herself for the sake of the country's resources, no one knew about her anymore. Until one day, the female ghost in red with clear and calm eyes opened her eyes underground. After being muddle-headed for thousands of years, she had long forgotten everything. The only thing that was clear in her mind was Lan Ling. It was something that she was willing to sacrifice her life to protect. Thus, a female ghost named Lan Ling appeared on this piece of land. A few years later, the Yin and Yang realms were unified, and the name of Ghost King Lan Ling spread. This powerful Ghost King had always been obsessed with the memories of her previous life, because she always felt that they must be very important. It wasn't until the 69 heavenly tribulations and the divine court summoned her that she finally saw her past and present lives in the three-world mirror of the divine court. So, my name is Yen Yang. Chapter 1190. System, start the next mission. Gu Xingyin had just returned to the space when she saw Feng Lin's final choice. Although she had already expected it, she still couldn't help but feel her heart skip a beat. The system's white light flashed. Host, do you really not need to rest? Traversing through mission worlds for a long time. Will it affect my body and soul? Gu Xingyin directly interrupted it. The system paused for a moment before replying, "It won't, host." She didn't know why, but Gu Xingyin felt that she could hear a sense of dejection from the emotionless voice of the system. "Is there a problem?" she calmly asked. The system flashed white light again. "No, host. It's just that I feel that you might need to rest." Gu Xingyin shook her head. "I don't need it. Let's start the next mission." "Okay, host." As a system, it couldn't interfere with any of the host's decisions. Transfer memories. "Okay, host." Gu Xingyin hadn't even opened her eyes when she felt a cold liquid dripping down from above. Hiss. It was really cold. Opening her eyes, Gu Xingyin discovered that it was raining. Occasionally, there would be people hurrying by, leaving behind a tall back view in her eyes. "Wait, tall?" She lowered her head and glanced at her short and chubby paws. Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded for a moment. Then, he decisively looked around and found a deserted place under the eaves. He crawled under an abandoned cardboard box with great effort. It was much warmer. She then began to organize the memories that the system had just transferred to her. Once the memories were transferred, she felt unwell for a few seconds. The original body of this body was actually a spirit beast that had long gone extinct in this world. Spiritual beasts could appear in any form, but the first appearance they took would be their original appearance in the future. This world was a technological plane. Simply speaking, the technological plane didn't believe in ghosts and gods. Things like ghosts and gods always existed if one believed in them. If one didn't believe in them, they didn't exist. Therefore, in this world where everyone believed in science, there was no existence of supernatural beings, let alone spiritual beasts, which sounded very high and mighty. However, this spiritual beast just had to appear. Gu Xingyin immediately asked the system, "Then wouldn't the original body's appearance be unreasonable?" The system's white light flashed as it replied, "Host, its existence is reasonable. The world's storyline has already acknowledged the existence of this spiritual beast." There was no problem with the consciousness of this spiritual beast. It was recognized by the laws of the world, and the host didn't have to worry about anything going wrong. "Its origin, I don't know its origin." Gu Xingyin. Alright, she got it, memories. This spiritual beast that appeared in this world in the form of a cat was currently in its infancy stage. Although spiritual beasts were extremely powerful and awesome existences after they matured, that was only after they matured. They were still in their infancy not long after they were born. They wouldn't be much stronger than ordinary animals. At most, their intelligence would be slightly more mature. This spiritual beast's appearance wasn't bad. Logically speaking, under normal circumstances, it was very likely that it would be adopted by a kind-hearted person who liked animals. After that, it would live a blissful life where it would be meticulously taken care of. Chapter 1191. But that was only a possibility. This spiritual beast didn't encounter such a good thing. She was indeed picked up by a little girl. But if the spiritual beast knew what happened later, no matter what happened, she would risk her life to stay away from that little pervert. That's right, little pervert. That girl, and Weiwei, who liked to wear pink princess dresses and looked as beautiful as a doll, was a pervert with a twisted mind. Her family background was very good, but her parents were in a business marriage. They hated each other and each of them had their own little lovers outside. And Weiwei, who was born in such a situation, had never lacked material comfort since she was young, but she had never enjoyed the warmth of a family. A child raised in such a family environment was very likely to have a completely different extreme personality, either a pure white lotus, or an extremely cold and heartless one. The possibility of the latter appearing was much higher than the former. But Weiwei's personality was far more twisted than being cold and heartless. She looked obedient and sweet on the surface, but in private, she had a strong desire to be violent. There was a beast living in her heart. Every time she saw those soft and harmless pitiful little animals, she couldn't help but want to be violent. She wanted to see them lying in front of her covered in blood, looking at the world in despair with their clear eyes, and then die miserably. When Weiwei found the spiritual beast in the heavy rain, she was in a very bad mood. As long as she was in a bad mood, she would want to be violent even more. The spiritual beast was brought home by Weiwei. Weiwei raised her with good food and watched as she turned from a pitiful little thing into a snow-white and precious little pet. The more beautiful the spiritual beast was, the sweeter the smile on Weiwei's face became. The butler who had been taking care of her thought that Miss liked this beautiful little thing, but he didn't know that his Miss liked this little thing. However, what she liked was the way it lay in a pool of blood. Spiritual beasts were different from ordinary animals. She was born with an extraordinary sensitivity to human auras. She could sense that although the beautiful human girl who brought her home smiled at her all day, she didn't like her. She only felt that she sensed danger from Weiwei and tried to leave. But how could Weiwei, who had been watching her, let her run away? What a sensitive little thing. Weiwei revealed a big smile. After that, the spiritual beast was brought into a sealed room. He never came out again. Gu Xingyin shuddered inexplicably as he looked at the long and bloody description. Sensing the cold wind outside and her own shivering body, Gu Xingyin admitted that she was cold. Weiwei's little pervert couldn't scare her. The inside of the box was dark and damp, while the outside was bleak and rainy. Gu Xingyin, who had traveled through countless worlds and lived like a princess, said that if she could open her mouth right now, she would be able to sing a tearful song. Wait, in the heavy rain. Gu Xingyin came back to her senses. She was still in her infancy, and it was raining heavily outside. Right now, this body didn't have any ability to resist. Gu Xingyin tried her best to shrink her small body into the paper box to reduce her presence. Could it be that it was such a coincidence that Weiwei, that little pervert, took a fancy to her? Chapter 1192. Mr. Fong, this way please. A man in a black suit walked out of a building opposite them. His assistant held an umbrella for him. Gu Xingyin's eyes lit up when she saw him. She had an idea. Fong Yuhan had just finished a business meeting. He did not expect to encounter such bad weather when he came out. He looked at the gray sky and frowned. Fortunately, his assistant had placed a spare umbrella in the car. When he turned a corner, he suddenly heard a soft sound that sounded like a cat meowing. A cat meowing? He turned his head in confusion. The assistant was puzzled as to why his CEO had stopped in his tracks. He followed his CEO's gaze. A small head popped out of a cardboard box next to him. A cat? Fong Yuhan looked at the small thing that seemed to be struggling to crawl out of the cardboard box that was much bigger than its body. For some reason, he felt a little amused. It was so small. Fong Yuhan glanced at it. The kitten-like thing was probably only the size of his palm. It was obvious that it had just been born. Since it had appeared in such a place, it must have been abandoned. At this moment, its light fur was wet from the rain and stuck to its body. It looked very pathetic. CEO? His assistant's careful voice pulled him back from his thoughts. Fong Yuhan shook his head and tried to get rid of his messy thoughts. What was wrong with him? Didn't he always dislike these delicate and fragile little creatures? Gu Xingyin had just crawled out of the cardboard box when she saw Fong Yuhan's back. She was dumbfounded. He left? Just as she was about to chase after him, another car stopped not far from her. Miss, there is a kitten here, a gentle voice said. Gu Xingyin's wet hair stood on end. The system had given her a clear notification, and Weiwei was here. The person in the car was Weiwei. A small red umbrella opened from the car door and a small figure appeared in Gu Xingyin's line of sight. And Weiwei's appearance was indeed very deceiving. Gu Xingyin thought so with a single glance. And Weiwei's big, clear eyes swept over Gu Xingyin. She said softly, "Ah, what a pitiful kitten. Uncle Wen, shall we bring it home?" The middle-aged man called Uncle Wen frowned and said, "Miss, this stray cat is of unknown origin. We don't know if it has any virus. Moreover, these animals have no feelings. Miss, you've adopted so many small animals, but they all ran away as soon as their injuries were healed. It's obvious that they're not familiar with you." Gu Xingyin, "No, let those poor animals go. They didn't run away on their own, but they all died in the hands of your family's sweet and innocent young lady." "But Uncle Wen." And Weiwei began to act coquettishly, trying to bargain with the butler. Gu Xingyin ran in the direction of Fang Yuhan. "Did you guys ever consider my feelings when you were talking so passionately over there? I don't want to accept your kindness." And Weiwei, who had finally convinced the butler, saw Gu Xingyin leave. She quickly shouted, "Oh, Uncle Wen, the kitten ran away. Quick! Go after it." Gu Xingyin ran even faster when she heard this. Chapter 1193. What a joke. If An Weiwei really brought her back, Gu Xingyin couldn't guarantee that her tiny arms and legs would be able to escape from the An family's huge villa. Because of the rain, Fang Yuhan didn't walk very fast. When Gu Xingyin saw the figure in front of her, she suddenly felt her neck tighten. Someone was holding her soft flesh and lifting her up. Ouch! It hurts. She struggled futilely in midair with her 4 paws, but she couldn't grab anything. "Miss, I've caught this little guy." She heard the person who was holding her shout behind him. "Damn it!" And Weiwei's men still caught her. Gu Xingyin looked at Fang Yuhan, who didn't seem to have any reaction to what was happening. She opened her mouth and screamed. Fang Yuhan stopped in his tracks. He heard the pitiful cries of the little animal behind him. "President, what's wrong?" asked the assistant, puzzled. Fang Yuhan didn't answer. Instead, he turned around. Through the thick curtain of rain, he could see the little animal, which had been screaming at him earlier, being suspended in midair. It looked very miserable. When he saw the cold expression on the face of the person holding the little animal, Fang Yuhan suddenly felt very uncomfortable. He strode in the direction of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin was still struggling. The man holding her seemed a little annoyed and scolded, "What are you screaming for? It's your fortune that Miss likes you. In the future, when you come to the An family, you'll be fed well. Isn't that better than wandering outside?" Gu Xingyin thought to herself, "Your miss didn't bring me back to feed me. She brought me back so that she could cut me open." When the man saw that the disobedient cat was still struggling with all its might, he subconsciously tightened his grip. "Stop it. If you continue, you'll suffer. What do you want to do to my cat?" A cold voice sounded from beside him. When the man holding Gu Xingyin heard this voice, he couldn't help but shudder. He seemed to feel a little embarrassed, so he turned his head and shouted at the person who came, "What do you mean your cat?" "My hand is clearly," his voice was stuck in his throat. Because he clearly saw who the man in front of him was. His master had just struck a deal with the other party today. The head of the Fang family was someone that even his teacher had to treat with respect. If his teacher knew that he dared to yell at Mr. Fang, he couldn't help but shudder again, and hurriedly put on a smile on his face. "So it's Mr. Fang. I was rude just now." Fang Yuhan glanced at him. He was not interested in listening to the man's nonsense. He simply pointed at Gu Xingyin in the man's hand. "You're hurting my cat," he said coldly. "Yours?" The man glanced at the dirty Gu Xingyin. It was clearly a stray cat that had just been born. "Mr. Fang, are you mistaken? This is a stray cat that I just picked up, meow." Gu Xingyin meowed at Fang Yuhan, as if it was very eager to go to his side. Its actions were very intimate. The man hesitated. From the looks of it, it really did look like Mr. Fang's cat. Fang Yuhan strangely felt a sense of satisfaction from the little cat's actions. Now, can you return my cat to me? The man hesitated for a moment and decided that he couldn't offend Fang Yuhan. So, he quickly handed the cat over. Chapter 1194. However, when he handed the handkerchief over, Fang Yuhan's hand stiffened for a moment. To be honest, he didn't know why he felt uncomfortable when he saw the cat crying pitifully. That was why he had come over and told a lie. However, the little guy in front of him was dirty and wet. Fang Yuhan, who was obsessed with cleanliness, couldn't stand it. Just as he was about to take out a handkerchief from his pocket, Gu Xingyin jumped out of the man's hand and landed firmly on Fang Yuhan's shoulder. Meow. Gu Xingyin seemed to dislike the cold on his shoulder, so it looked around. Then, with a slight push of its hind legs, it jumped into its target, the pocket of Fang Yuhan's suit that he had just put his hand into. Fang Yuhan's entire body froze. He could feel a warmth in his left pocket that didn't belong to him. His first reaction was to reach out and throw this audacious guy to the ground. However, the other party did something else. Perhaps it was because the human body in the pocket was too warm, Gu Xingyin couldn't help but stretch out its little head and rub against the inside of his pocket. It even meowed softly. This sound was completely different from the frightened and shrill voice from before. Instead, it was filled with laziness and satisfaction. It was very happy. After realizing this, the trace of uneasiness in Fang Yuhan's heart strangely disappeared. Forget it. It's rare to meet such a little thing that I don't hate. I'll just keep it. The assistant beside him was dumbfounded when he saw the obvious muddy water marks on his president and the dirty cat in his pocket. The people from the Yin family didn't know, but he could clearly see that the president didn't recognize the cat at all. Was this really the cold and misophobic president he knew? The assistant looked up at the sky and wondered if he was hallucinating because of the bad weather. Let's go, the president said in his usual cold voice. The assistant turned around and met the president's cold gaze. He immediately went into professional mode. Sure enough, this was still the president. As for the cat, the assistant decided to forget about it. The person from the Yin family watched as the two people and the cat left under an umbrella in the heavy rain. He did not doubt Fang Yuhan's words. After all, he had seen the interaction between Mr. Fang and the cat. With President Fang's personality, if it wasn't his own, how could he allow a little bastard to be so impudent? He turned around and went back. And Weiwei, who was waiting in the car, saw him come back empty-handed. Her expression was a little unpleasant. Where's the cat? The man said apologetically, that kitten has an owner. Just now, its owner, Mr. Fang, came and took it away. Mr. Fang? Although An Weiwei was young, she knew very well that he wasn't someone she could afford to offend. Since it was his cat, then forget it. However, it was a pity. When she thought of the kitten shivering in the heavy rain, a trace of regret appeared in her eyes. That little thing must be very beautiful when its eyes were filled with despair. The housekeeper saw her like this and thought that she was unhappy because she liked the kitten. He thoughtfully bent down and suggested, Miss, if you really like these little fellows, why don't we go to the cattery and raise one? And Weiwei smiled when she heard this. Uncle One, you're the best. Chapter 1195. Fang Yuhan returned home with Gu Xingyin. For the convenience of his work, he did not live in a villa in the suburbs. Instead, he chose a high-end apartment near his company. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. It was more than enough for one person. In addition, he was a bit of a clean freak and did not like outsiders. He also did not hire a servant at home. Instead, he regularly asked a housekeeping company to clean the house. When he returned home, the first thing Fang Yuhan did was take out the little fella from his pocket and placed her on the floor. A few small gray footprints appeared on the white floor in an instant. Fang Yuhan frowned and picked up Gu Xingyin, who had just regained her freedom. He was about to give this dirty little thing a bath. However, when he was about to use the bathroom, he suddenly remembered that he did not know how to do it. He remembered that his assistant had a cat at home. According to him, cats were precious creatures and could not be treated casually. Fang Yuhan frowned again. How troublesome. Thus, before the assistant reached home, he received an urgent call from his CEO. When he found out that the CEO had asked him to come over in such a serious tone, just to give the cat a bath and feed her, the assistant cried tears of sadness in his heart. In this day and age, the assistant had no human rights. The cat was the boss. No, this seemed to be a little girl. Alright, let's change it a little. The cat was the boss. The assistant was filled with grief and anger as he gently gave Gu Xingyin a bath. However, when he finished bathing Gu Xingyin, the grief and indignation in his heart suddenly turned into shock. What a beautiful little thing. The kitten's fur was pure white and its eyes were a rare dark purple. When it looked at people quietly, it seemed to be infinitely mysterious and distant. It was noble and lazy. Furthermore, the assistant did not recognize what kind of cat it was. Her appearance was no different from an ordinary cat, but her tail was completely different from an ordinary cat. Instead, she had a big furry tail like a squirrel. He could imagine how tempting that fluffy tail would be when the kitten grew up. Forget it, if I can't figure it out, then I won't think about it. Maybe it's some kind of rare mutation? The warm male assistant looked at Gu Xingyin with sparkling eyes. The only thing he didn't do was hold his heart and shout, "Your Highness, let this servant serve you." Gu Xingyin looked arrogantly at the human who was looking at it with a silly expression and meowed proudly. The assistant immediately understood that the princess was hungry. He went to his own CEO's kitchen to search, but it was empty. Well, she probably didn't cook much either. The assistant said patiently, "Baby, wait a minute. I'll go to the supermarket to buy cat food for you." After saying that, he took his wallet and rushed out of the door. Gu Xingyin, wait a minute. Who said I wanted to eat cat food? Also, what the hell is a little baby? Gu Xingyin was still complaining when Fang Yuhan walked out of the bathroom in a bathrobe. Her eyes immediately fell on him. The collar of the bathrobe was not tied tightly, so a large area of skin was exposed from his collarbone to his chest. Gu Xingyin glanced at him innocently and commented in her heart, "Nice body." Below his waist were two strong and long legs. His muscles weren't exaggerated, but the smooth lines showed that the owner of this body wasn't someone who spent most of his time in an office. Fang Yuhan lowered his head and saw a beautiful little thing staring at him without blinking. Chapter 1196. Gu Xingyin blinked innocently. Right now, she was just a little beast that didn't know anything. In fact, Fang Yuhan only treated her as a little beast that didn't know anything. However, this little guy was surprisingly beautiful. A trace of admiration flashed across Fang Yuhan's eyes. If it weren't for the fact that it was in a sorry state in the heavy rain, many people would have fought to take it back. Fang Yuhan had seen many people who treated their pets like their ancestors, so he was quite calm. "Come here." He sat on the sofa and waved at Gu Xingyin, who was squatting on the other side of the sofa. Gu Xingyin did not hesitate. She cooperatively got up and walked over to him. However, she overestimated the balance of this body. Just as she was about to reach Fang Yuhan, she stumbled and her left leg hit her right leg. She was small and round like a ball, so she rolled directly toward Fang Yuhan. Meow. Gu Xingyin felt as if she had bumped into something hard. It didn't hurt, but it didn't feel comfortable either. She cried out in grievance. However, she did not receive a response from Fang Yuhan. Gu Xingyin raised her head and saw Fang Yuhan's strange expression. "What? Are you unhappy? Could it be that I'm going to hurt you?" Gu Xingyin stepped on the ground and wanted to jump onto Fang Yuhan's shoulder. Unexpectedly, she saw Fang Yuhan's expression change even more. She lowered her head in hindsight, and her heart instantly burst with embarrassment. It seemed that she had accidentally stepped on something terrible. If Gu Xingyin was a human, she would probably die of embarrassment. However, she was a spiritual beast. Yes. That's right, she was a spiritual beast that didn't know anything. Gu Xingyin comforted herself and pretended that nothing had happened. She gently jumped onto Fang Yuhan's shoulder and playfully patted Fang Yuhan's face with her soft front paws. It was as if he was saying, "What a bold fellow. You didn't help me up when you saw me fall." Fang Yuhan's uneasiness was washed away by the little girl's arrogance. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he couldn't help but smile. Fang Yuhan grabbed onto Gu Xingyin's tiny hands and pulled her off his shoulder. He then said to her in a serious tone, "You can't just climb onto my shoulder. Otherwise, I won't bring you along." Gu Xingyin turned her back to him and said, "Sorry, I'm just a cat. I don't understand anything." Fang Yuhan, he had only said it casually and did not expect the little beast to understand. But why did she feel that it could actually understand her? Fang Yuhan turned it around and pulled its hind legs apart to take a look. Gu Xingyin, what was he doing? Hooligan. However, Fang Yuhan couldn't understand what she was thinking. Instead, he muttered to himself, "So, she's a young lady." Gu Xingyin, her heart was so tired. Did spiritual beasts not have animal rights? Fang Yuhan didn't realize that he had done something unacceptable. He simply held his chin and thought about a problem seriously. "Since you're at my house, you should give me a name." Gu Xingyin was excited when she heard this. A name was very important. She hoped that this highly educated CEO had the aesthetic standards to match his education. In the original plot, An Weiwei brought the spiritual beast home just to amuse herself. Why would she spend so much effort to give it a name? Fang Yuhan looked at the little cat, who was instantly energized and staring at him without blinking. His heart skipped a beat. She seemed to be able to understand human language. "You'll be called, Ba Gingji is back." "What should I call her?" "Take a guess, it's the last day of the month. Although I'm dead on the monthly votes list, I still have some food left. I'll feed Gao Lingji, Mua." Chapter 1197. Fang Yuhan watched as the kitten perked up its ears. It seemed to care a lot about this matter. He was curious. Could it be that the kitten could understand human language? However, he simply assumed that the kitten was naturally more intelligent than other animals. He didn't think that there was anything magical about it. However, when he saw the look on her face, he couldn't help but want to tease her. "Since you're so white, why don't we call you Xiaobai?" A deep voice sounded from above her head. Gu Xingyin, she turned around and refused to communicate with the person in front of her. Fang Yuhan couldn't help but smile when he saw the human-like behavior of the kitten on his lap. "Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Let's call you Shueli, Gu Xingyin." Although the name wasn't that great, it was still better than Xiaobai's name. While she was thinking about it, Fang Yuhan thought that she was still unhappy. He frowned and said, "If Shueli doesn't work, what about Snowball?" "Snowball? Snow?" As he spoke, his assistant came in with a bunch of things. He happened to hear his CEO muttering to himself. When the assistant heard his CEO's words and realized that he was naming the kitten, he opened his mouth. However, he didn't dare to complain about his CEO's taste. What could he do? He was also afraid that his bonus would be deducted. In the end, Gu Xingyin's name was decided. It was a homonym for Shueli. After deciding on the name, the assistant was sent to the kitchen to prepare dinner for Fang Yuhan and the kitten. Fang Yuhan sat in the living room with Shueli in his arms and watched TV. His assistant, Xiao Lu, was very fast. This was Fang Yuhan's idea. He just needed to make 2 dishes. As for the cat food for Gu Xingyin, it was even more convenient. However, when Xiao Lu held the bowl of paste and looked at Gu Xingyin expectantly, Gu Xingyin turned her head away in disgust. "I'm a psychic beast." "A psychic beast? Don't treat me like a cat, okay? What's wrong?" Fang Yuhan frowned and looked over. Knowing that he was unwilling to eat, he seemed a little worried. He asked his assistant, "Is it because the food you make tastes awful?" Xiao Lu, who was innocently implicated, "Can you blame me for this? I'm just processing the cat food a little, okay?" However, he didn't have the guts to yell at his boss. He could only say as calmly as possible, "The taste of cat food is about the same." What he meant was that he wasn't going to take the blame. Fang Yuhan completely missed the point. Instead, he asked worriedly, what if Shirley doesn't like it? The assistant was also worried when he heard that. What if such a small kitten didn't eat? Gu Xingyin completely ignored the two worrisome fellows. She nimbly jumped from Fang Yuhan's lap to his arm and meowed at the 3 dishes and 1 soup that Xiao Lu had just made on the table. This king wants to eat. I don't want to eat cat food. Fang Yuhan's train of thought suddenly connected with hers. Do you want to eat the food on the table? Gu Xingyin's little white tail that hadn't grown up yet started wagging. That's right. Fang Yuhan's eyes lit up and he said to his assistant, go and get another small bowl. His assistant, Xiao Lu, was dumbfounded. No, President, kittens can't eat human food. They will get sick, Gu Xingyin meowed at him. Then, she looked at the food in his hand that didn't taste good and revealed a look of disgust. Xiao Lu, don't ask me why I can see disgust on a cat's face. Chapter 1198. Gu Xingyin was actually exhausted. To be honest, although her current appearance was that of an ordinary cat, she was still a very impressive spiritual beast. She wouldn't be as delicate as a real cat. Human food did not have any effect on her. On the contrary, if she really ate those strange cat foods like a cat, there would probably be a problem. Perhaps because her reaction was too strong and Fang Yuhan had no common sense, he actually agreed to let her try human food. Xiao Lu despaired of his willful CEO. However, he still took out a small bowl and scooped a bowl of light soup for Gu Xingyin. Fang Yuhan probably knew that ordinary cats could not be raised like this, especially when Shirley was so young. He did not let her eat too much and observed her for a long time. After making sure that she was fine and that she was eating happily, he finally relaxed. I will take Shirley to see a doctor this weekend. If the doctor says that she is fine, I will let her eat with me in the future. CEO Fang quickly made a decision. As a cat slave, assistant Xiao Lu was very desperate for his boss. He also sympathized with this very beautiful kitten who had a tough life. In his opinion, it was incomprehensible to have a lover like his CEO. Shirley's owner was Shirley's tragedy. But what could an assistant say? Xiao Lu could only pray for Shirley in his heart. Obviously, Fang Yuhan and Gu Xingyin could not understand Xiao Lu's worries. After dinner and after Xiao Lu cleaned up everything, Fang Yuhan unceremoniously asked him to leave. Only the man and the cat were left in the room. The weather was bad, so there was no outdoor exercise. Fang Yuhan could only turn on the TV and find a financial program to watch. It was a very boring thing, especially for an animal that was still in its infancy. That's right. After being in this psychic beast, Gu Xingyin found that she had some uncontrollable behaviors. Although she could control this body, at certain times, such as when she saw Fang Yuhan, whom she approved of, she could not help but reveal some instinctive behaviors that belonged to a young animal. Then, at certain times, her mind would uncontrollably become quite childish. Just like now. Fang Yuhan, who was focused on watching the show, suddenly felt something tugging at the clothes around his waist. He lowered his head and saw the little thing that he had just picked up today biting his clothes restlessly. Don't mess around. He frowned slightly and scolded in a low voice. When the great CEO Fang was concentrating on something, he hated to be disturbed the most. If he was in the company, those people would know that he was unhappy from his tone and would definitely not dare to continue to disturb him. However, it was clear that his scolding had no effect on a certain young fellow. The force of the bite on his clothes became even stronger. Fang Yuhan's attention was diverted again. His expression was a little ugly, but when he met the palm-sized little ball's clear eyes, he just couldn't get angry. President Fang felt that there was something wrong with this feeling, but his hands were already holding up the little guy who kept harassing him. He placed it at eye level. Chapter 1199. Be good, Shirley. Don't make a fuss. This time, his voice sounded helpless. President Fang did not know that those delicate little things were very sensitive to human emotions, let alone Gu Xingyin, who knew his nature very well. That was why she relied on his tolerance to act coquettishly. Fang Yuhan's gentleness was met with even bolder actions from Gu Xingyin. She stretched out her little paws and kept scratching Fang Yuhan's hand, trying to run up to his head and behave atrociously. That's right. She wanted to behave atrociously. Fang Yuhan looked at the little kitten with a headache. That's right. Up until now, both Xiao Lu and President Fang thought that Gu Xingyin was just a rare cat. He thought for a moment, took out his phone, and did a quick search. Soon, he found a forum frowny face question. When I watch TV, my cat keeps biting my clothes and scratching my body. She even wants to climb on top of my head. She doesn't stop for a moment. What can I do to stop her? This forum was obviously more active. Not long after he posted the post, he heard a lot of replies. 1L, the original poster is here to show off. Identification complete. 2L, fuck. Are you annoyed by such a cute kitten? Are you annoyed? Are you annoyed? If you are annoyed, you can contact me. 3L, what's the point of talking about it without a picture? Fang Yuhan looked at these meaningless replies expressionlessly. This was also the reason why he hated forums, Tieba, and other social media platforms. Almost half of them were meaningless and exaggerated posts. The president, who was busy every day, didn't understand the meaning of wasting time on such things, and couldn't figure out what the so-called cute points were. Gu Xingyin saw that he was playing with his phone and ignoring her. She was a little displeased and bit the hand that he used to press her down. Of course, she was careful with her strength. There was a slight tingling sensation that attracted his attention, but it did not break his skin and hurt him. Ding! Finally, there was a proper reply. 13L, I guess this is the first time the original poster has raised a cat, right? I'm sure you haven't learned anything about it. In the situation you described, your little girl is obviously bored and wants you, the master, to play with her. At this time, as the master, it would be good if he could spare some time to play with her. In the end, they expressed their envy that the tower master had such a clingy little girl. My family's king is always looking at me with disdain. 16L, upstairs +1, my queen majesty is the same. I really want to be pampered once. 17L, I really want to be pampered once +1, President Fang was too lazy to read the rest of the content. He already knew what he wanted to know anyway. He tossed the phone aside and turned his attention back to Gu Xingyin, who was struggling to break free from his grip. Fang Yuhan exerted a little force in his hand and lifted her up. Take time out to play with her? President Fang thought expressionlessly, how can I play with a cat? He recalled the time when he went to Assistant Xiao Lu's house. Xiao Lu was sitting on the sofa and stroking the ragdoll cat's fur. President Fang was a little hesitant. Slowly, he reached out his free hand and gently stroked Xiao Lu's soft back. Meow. The little cat, who was still making a fuss in his palm, instantly settled down. She squinted her eyes and meowed. She was obviously very comfortable. She was indeed asking for love and petting. Seeing Shirley like this, a strange sense of satisfaction arose in President Fang's heart. Chapter 1200. Fang Yuhan had never imagined that he would one day patiently play with a cat. But that was the truth. Not only did he stroke Shirley's hair, but he also stroked her slightly raised chin without anyone teaching him. Gu Xingyin, who was being served very comfortably, finally quieted down. She squinted her eyes and lay in his palm obediently. She was so obedient. Fang Yuhan looked at the kitten and couldn't help but smile. Gu Xingyin felt a little tired. Her childhood body was already prone to sleepiness. She had just made a fuss, so now that she was relaxed, she felt sleepy all over. By the time Fang Yuhan realized it, the white ball in his palm had already closed her eyes. Her small body rose and fell with her breathing. She was very cute. Fang Yuhan didn't know what she was dreaming of, but her delicate little nose suddenly twitched and her two round little ears trembled. Fang Yuhan, who happened to see this scene, felt as if his heart had been electrocuted. He felt numb. In internet terms, Fang Yuhan was instantly captivated by Shirley's cuteness. Seeing Shirley fall asleep, Fang Yuhan realized that he hadn't prepared a nest for her to sleep in. He couldn't possibly let her sleep in his palm all night, right? Fang Yuhan placed the sleeping white ball on the sofa and prepared to look for something himself. However, as soon as he put her down, the little ball seemed to have been awakened by something. She stood up shakily. Fang Yuhan saw that her eyes were closed. He was afraid that she would fall off the sofa, so he quickly reached out and held her in his palm. Then, he saw the little ball sniff with her delicate little nose. She seemed to have found something she was very satisfied with. She closed her eyes again and fell asleep. Was she looking for him? When Fang Yuhan realized this, his heart seemed to be filled with warm bubbles. She was so cute. Fang Yuhan couldn't help but gently kiss the top of her head as he looked at her sleeping contentedly in his palm. After kissing her, Fang Yuhan finally realized what he had done. His gentle expression instantly returned to his usual calmness. However, his red ears showed that what had just happened wasn't an illusion. He, the famous Fang Yuhan, had actually kissed a kitten. Fang Yuhan thought to himself, it must have been an illusion. That guy can't be me. Fang Yuhan looked at the white ball sleeping so soundly in his hand and couldn't bear to wake her up. He turned down the volume of the TV and watched it for a while before he walked back to his room to rest. That's right, he didn't take Gu Shengyin away. He gently placed the white ball in his hand on his pillow. Just as he had expected, there was his scent on the pillow. The little white ball only moved a little when it was placed on top of the pillow. It changed into a comfortable position and continued to snore. Turn off the lights. Fang Yuhan lay down next to the little girl. Without completely covering her, he pulled down the blanket to cover her. The man and the cat fell into a dark and sweet dream. Gu Shengyin woke up very early. When she woke up, she realized that she was snuggled up in a warm embrace. She looked up and saw a pair of sexy thin lips. While she was sleeping, she curled herself up in Fang Yuhan's arms. Most importantly, when she saw the other party's sleeping appearance, before she could react, she had already stuck out her little tongue and quickly licked his thin lips. Chapter 1201. After licking him, Gu Shengyin finally realized what she had done with a dumbfounded look on her face. Her tiny body trembled a little. However, she was only a little bit big, so she didn't wake up the person who was sleeping soundly. Gu Shengyin buried her entire body under the blanket. It was too embarrassing. The person who had been acting coquettishly, asking for attention, kissing, hugging, and being lifted up high last night definitely wasn't her. The person who couldn't control her moral integrity in the face of the beauty in the morning definitely wasn't her. At this moment, the system calmly said, "Host, please face reality. Running away won't solve any problems." Gu Shengyin, what kind of nonsense was that? However, the system couldn't understand Gu Shengyin's thoughts. In its opinion, the host's situation was very normal. She had possessed the body of a young spiritual beast, so wasn't it normal for her to do things that were similar to the original owner's personality? Hence, the system comforted Gu Shengyin and said, "Host, don't feel uncomfortable. The young spiritual beast needs at least a year. It's better for the host to get used to it as soon as possible." Gu Shengyin, she wasn't comforted at all. If she didn't understand the system and know that it didn't have the emotions of an ordinary creature, she would definitely think that it was gloating. At this moment, Fang Yuhan woke up from his sleep. His long-term routine meant that he didn't need an alarm clock. His daily biological clock allowed him to wake up at the same time every day. As soon as he woke up, he sensed that something was wrong. Something seemed to be moving under the blanket beside him. Fang Yuhan, who was still in the early stages of waking up and wasn't very conscious, reached his hand out and pulled out a little white ball that was still reflecting on itself. Gu Shengyin was still berating herself for not being able to control herself a second ago. The next moment, she felt the world spinning around her. In the blink of an eye, she was facing a handsome face. That pair of eyes were as cold as the cold stars in the day, but at this time, they were shrouded in a thin layer of mist, which softened the outline of that person's face. Before Gu Shengyin could react, she couldn't help but stick out her little pink tongue and lick his dark eyes. Ugh. Gu Xingyin covered her eyes with her two little paws after she finished licking. I can't see, I can't hear, I don't know anything. The system, who had been watching the entire process, was speechless. This time, Fang Yuhan was truly clear-headed. He looked at the little white ball in his hand and finally realized that this was the little fellow that he had picked up out of kindness yesterday. Seeing Shirley cover her face shyly after giving him a passionate morning kiss, Fang Yuhan was surprised by Shirley's humanness and was in a good mood. He now understood the thoughts of those cat slaves. It felt great that his little princess liked to get close to him. Of course, as a cold CEO, Fang Yuhan wouldn't use the word great, which sounded very indecent. CEO Fang's thin lips curled up slightly. Gu Xingyin, who had just lifted his head from covering his face, was instantly mesmerized by this rare gentleness and was stunned for a moment. Fang Yuhan looked at his little princess staring at him in a daze and was in a good mood. However, on the surface, he said coldly, "You're so dirty." What's the meaning of this? Gu Xingyin, when you say this, can't you retract the smile on your face first? Chapter 1202. The two masters, one human and one cat, spent a very harmonious morning together. However, Fang Yuhan felt troubled after he got up. He had to go to work. There was no food prepared for Shirley at home, and he was worried about letting Shirley, who had just arrived, stay at home all day. Shirley was so young and mischievous. What if she fell while jumping around? What if Shirley got scared and was alone at home? What if Shirley got hungry? Fang Yuhan, who was immersed in his worries, did not realize that this little kitten, whom he had only met for one night, had already occupied an important place in his heart. This was not normal. However, CEO Fang did not realize this at this moment. Gu Xingyin did not understand his worries. As a spiritual beast, she was not as fragile as Fang Yuhan was worried about. She was not afraid at all. As for being hungry, even if she did not eat for a month, her life would not be in danger. She would only become very weak and might even damage her foundation. However, she could not tell Fang Yuhan about this. Furthermore, as a young spiritual beast, it was actually very clingy. She wanted to stay with Fang Yuhan every day. In the end, under the gaze of Gu Xingyin's dark purple eyes, CEO Fang made a big decision. He was going to take his little princess to work. Of course, as a cold CEO, Fang Yuhan would never do something like having a little kitten on his shoulder, which would damage his image. As a result, Gu Xingyin's temporary residence became Fang Yuhan's pocket. Anyway, she was small, so it was no problem for her to fit in. The system said, there is a fairy tale book in this world called The Little Princess in the Pocket. It's about a beautiful princess in the distant west. Stop. Gu Xingyin could not help but interrupt the system. She seriously suggested, "System, I suggest you read some books that are more profound. The Little Princess in the Pocket is used to coax children who don't know any better." Children who don't know any better, system. Okay, host. It was clearly an emotionless system, but for some reason, it felt a little stifled. When they arrived at the Fang Corporation, Fang Yuhan did not look around. Under the respectful gazes of all the employees in the company, he walked into his personal passageway and walked into his office expressionlessly and coldly. From the beginning to the end, no one realized that their cold and cool CEO had a cute little kitten in his pocket. Assistant Lu, who was busy writing, was called to the president's office by her boss. "President, what can I do for you?" Assistant Lu was a little nervous. The CEO rarely called him at the beginning of work. Could it be that there was something wrong with his work yesterday? Assistant Lu thought about it carefully, but she still didn't understand. He anxiously waited for his CEO's instructions. "Go and buy me breakfast," Fang Yuhan said calmly. Assistant Lu. He didn't know whether he should cry or laugh at this moment. If he wanted to buy breakfast, he could have just sent a message or made a call. Why did he have to ask him to come up? Then, he heard a very soft meow. Assistant Lu suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. But then, he saw a white furry little head poking out from the left pocket of the CEO who was sitting upright. Chapter 1203. Assistant Lu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. After a long while, he said, "Is this Shirley?" Fang Yuhan nodded with a cold expression. Seeing that his assistant was looking at Shirley with sparkling eyes, he reached out his hand without a trace. The little kitten that had just crawled its head out rolled back with a thud. Gu Xingyin, who was dizzy and disoriented, Assistant Lu, the corners of Fang Yuhan's mouth curled up subtly. "I called you up to bring another bowl of plain porridge. Shirley doesn't seem to have a problem eating human food, but it's better to eat plain porridge." Assistant Lu nodded to show that she understood. Then, he was chased out by his boss. Seeing that Assistant Lu had left, Fang Yuhan put his hand into his pocket and took out the little psychic beast that had been sulking. Gu Xingyin didn't want to talk to him at this time. As soon as she came out, she climbed onto his desk, turned around, and faced him with her chubby little butt. Fang Yuhan was a little helpless. Why was she so angry? He said in a low voice, "Okay, it's my fault. Don't be angry." Then, he saw that his little fellow's ears twitched, but she still didn't turn around. Fang Yuhan became serious and thought for a moment. This was his private office. Usually, no one would come in. Since no one would be able to see it, Gu Xingyin felt a pair of warm hands gently landing on her body. That pair of hands used a very gentle force to gently stroke her back. This feeling was so comfortable that she couldn't resist her instincts and moaned softly. "Stop." Gu Xingyin forced herself to stop. Even if she was just a young spiritual beast, she should still be a spiritual beast with moral integrity and principles. She should never give in to her instincts. But, it was really comfortable. This wasn't the end. President Fang saw that his Shirley was obviously relaxed under his touch. She even let out a comfortable purr. But suddenly, his body tensed up again. He did not know what had happened. Could it be that he was not feeling well? He thought about the little tricks he learned yesterday to comfort cats. He tentatively reached out his hand to Shirley's chin and gently scratched it twice. Meow. The enemy's lethality is too strong. Our army can't resist. As a child with no moral integrity, Gu, spiritual beast, Xingyin fell under President Fang's gentle attacks without much resistance. She very much enjoyed lying there and being comforted by him. Fang Yuhan heaved a sigh of relief. "I've finally managed to coax her." He couldn't help but reach out his hand and gently tap on that delicate little nose twice. "Such a delicate little girl, you're lucky to have met me." Gu Xingyin snorted twice, gently opened his mouth, and bit his fingertip with a moderate amount of force. "As long as it's not that little pervert in Weiwei, who wouldn't serve me well." The atmosphere between the two was just right. As soon as Assistant Xiao Lu pushed the door open, he saw his cold and aloof CEO stroking the beautiful Princess Xue Li's hair and tickling her. "Assistant Lu, this can't be my CEO. I must have opened the door the wrong way." Fang Yuhan withdrew his hand the moment Xiao Lu entered the door and sat upright. However, this could not hide the fact that he was still a cat slave just a second ago. Looking at the CEO who had turned back into the flower of the mountain in a second, Xiao Lu felt that he might have found out something incredible. Chapter 1204. If Assistant Lu could play with his mobile phone at this moment, his psychological state should be like this frowny face. "I saw the unknown side of the boss, which is completely different from his usual character. And the boss seems to be very unhappy now. Please advise me, am I done for? I'm waiting online. It's urgent." Then the following reply should be like this frowny face. "Ha ha 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 ha, light a candle for the OP. OP, please go home. OP, don't be a coward. You can start all over again." But the situation at the moment was that he stood awkwardly at the door with porridge in his hand. The president, who had been stroking his cat gently just now, was staring at him coldly. It seemed that everything he saw before was an illusion. Yes. An illusion. Assistant Lu's eyes lit up. He didn't know anything. So he blurted out, "President, I didn't see anything just now." The cold President Fang Yuhan, "I didn't want to do anything, but why did you say it?" Gu Xingyin, "Young man, if you have a defect in your IQ, I can't save you." Assistant Lu, who was crying because of his own stupidity. "Why did I say this?" Gu Xingyin looked at Assistant Lu, who wanted to cry but had no tears. It was rare for him to be kind to her. He meowed softly in the embarrassment. Assistant Lu's eyes lit up, as if he had caught the only light in the chaos. "President, is Shirley hungry?" Fang Yuhan glanced at him indifferently and finally looked away. He lowered his head and looked at Gu Xingyin. Assistant Lu breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that Princess Shirley was really his lucky star. Next time, he would bring some dried fish, Her Majesty's favorite. Would Princess Shirley like it? If Gu Xingyin knew what he was thinking, she would be very disgusted. Who likes dried fish? I said I was a psychic beast. Not a cat. Fang Yuhan's breakfast was rich, with porridge and snacks. Assistant Lu brought Gu Xingyin seafood porridge, which had been specially processed. Now it was not hot at all, only a little warm. He had a cat at home and knew that this kind of delicate little thing's tongue was very sensitive. It couldn't eat things that were too hot. Even humans would feel that normal temperatures were enough to burn them. Regarding this point, Gu Xingyin still wanted to complain. She really wasn't a cat. However, the porridge tasted pretty good. Gu Xingyin happily drank her porridge. After she was full, she meowed twice and then lay down naturally. She lay on all fours and meowed at CEO Fang, who had already finished his breakfast. Her meaning was very obvious. This lady ate until she was full. Come and give me a massage. President Fang, who had never been ordered around so confidently before, was speechless. There was a strange feeling in his heart, but he still reached out his hand and gently rubbed the little snowball's belly. Gu Xingyin enjoyed the treatment of a princess, while she despised her moral integrity that had long been thrown into the gutter. It was really shameful. However, it's so comfortable, meow. Fang Yuhan looked at the satisfied look on his little princess's face and couldn't help but laugh. Even he himself didn't know how gentle his expression was at this moment. There was a soft knock on the door. Fang Yuhan quickly restrained his expression and put Gu Xingyin in his pocket. Come in. Assistant Lu, who had learned to be obedient, entered the door. President, Missin and Little Missin are here to visit. Gu Xingyin trembled all over. Little Missin? Wasn't that in Weiwei? Meow, it finally came out before 12 o'clock. Please allow me to act cute. Meow, 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 I can ask for tickets. If possible, I'll act cute for you guys. Good night, babies. See you tomorrow. Chapter 1205. Gu Xingyin's interest was immediately piqued. However, Fang Yuhan's expression did not look too good. His expression was not bad because of An Weiwei, but because of An Weiwei's aunt, the eldest daughter of the An family, An Yuan. The An family had always had the intention of forming a marriage alliance with the Fang family, and the marriage partner was naturally the eldest daughter of the main family. Their target was, of course, the most important man in the Fang family. Fang Yuhan did not like An Yuan, but his uncles had always felt that marrying the eldest daughter of the An family was a good thing for the Fang family. An Yuan did not seem to like Fang Yuhan very much either. Everyone was just taking what they needed. If she married Fang Yuhan, she would have a very important bargaining chip in the fight for the family's inheritance. As for marriage, An Yuan, who had grown up in a big family, said that as long as she gave birth to an heir, both parties could play as they liked. She did not mind at all. Not to mention, Fang Yuhan was handsome and suited An Yuan's taste. She did not mind having a romantic relationship with such a handsome man. In short, An Yuan was unwilling to give up on such a suitable husband candidate. However, Fang Yuhan did not think so at all. His biological parents had passed away early, but he always remembered how warm the family of three was when the two of them were still around. Over the years, Fang Yuhan had seen many rich and powerful families fight for benefits, and husband and wife who slept in the same bed but dreamed different dreams. However, the more he saw, the more he was not disappointed in the true love of each other. On the contrary, he had seen too much hypocrisy, so he cherished the pure companionship between his parents even more. He had always wanted to find a lover who could be with him and spend a simple life with her. Therefore, he did not like the eldest daughter of the An family, who had a very clear goal from the beginning. And Yuan was here to look for Fang Yuhan. She had always had a good relationship with An Weiwei. After all, excluding her brother's messy illegitimate children, An Weiwei was the only child of the next generation of the An family. However, only An Yuan herself knew how much of her kindness to An Weiwei was sincere and how much of it was fake. In any case, such a pure little girl could be coaxed with a little effort. Naive little girl. An Weiwei smiled coldly. She actually didn't like her stupid aunt. Everyone could see that her aunt was not willing to accept that she, as the daughter of the family, could only get such a small share of the family's property. It was true that people were ambitious, but anyone who was a little smarter would know that when their strength was insufficient, they would hide their ambitions deeply. If even she could see it, how could her father, who had been immersed in the business world for more than 10 years, not see it? And Weiwei originally didn't want to come. She hadn't found a suitable small animal for almost half a month, which made her very irritable. However, An Yuan didn't care about her expression at all and dragged her over. An Yuan thought about it. She had known Fang Yuhan for so long, but she had never been able to find out what he liked. It was said that many cold-hearted people especially liked children. His niece was so cute. He wondered if Fang Yuhan would take a liking to her. And Weiwei still had an obedient smile on her face, but she was very annoyed inside. Chapter 1206. And Weiwei followed her aunt to the CEO's office of the Fang Corporation. As soon as she entered, she saw the man sitting in the office chair with a cold expression. And Weiwei remembered Fang Yuhan. The two of them had just met yesterday. The kitten that she had taken a fancy to was said to be owned by this man. When she thought of the kitten with big, clear, ink-purple eyes, and Weiwei's heart started racing. If he could get that little thing from this Mr. Fang's hands. Fang Yuhan also remembered An Weiwei. Yesterday, he had seen this little girl. If he hadn't changed his mind at the last minute, she would have been Shirley's owner by now. Thinking of this, Fang Yuhan rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he had been compassionate at that time. When Fang Yuan looked over, she happened to see Fang Yuhan looking at her little niece. She felt smug. It seemed that her strategy was effective. She introduced Fang Yuhan. Yuhan, this is my elder brother's daughter, Weiwei. Weiwei, hurry up and greet Uncle Fang. And Weiwei gave him face and greeted him as Uncle Fang. Fang Yuhan nodded faintly without any special reaction. For some reason, when he looked at the cute girl in front of him, he felt that something was amiss. It was as if there was something in her eyes that didn't belong to a teenager. His cold reaction was beyond An Yuan's expectations. She originally thought that he would be a little more friendly towards An Weiwei. Could it be that her guess was wrong? Fang Yuhan didn't like children at all? At this moment, An Weiwei said, Uncle Fang, I want to ask, how is the kitten that was drenched in the rain yesterday? Her tone was sincere and she looked worried. It didn't seem like she was faking it at all. A little girl at her age was the easiest to arouse affection in people's hearts. Not to mention, An Weiwei was talking about Gu Xingyin. Fang Yuhan's mood improved a little. He said to An Weiwei, Shirley is fine. His expression softened at the mention of his pet. An Yuan didn't understand what they were talking about. Looking at Fang Yuhan's expression, she was glad that she had made the right decision. It seemed that Fang Yuhan liked Weiwei a lot. In that case, she could bring her niece here more often in the future. Gu Xingyin stayed in Fang Yuhan's pocket, listening to the conversation between Fang Yuhan and An Weiwei. Why did it seem like Fang Yuhan had a good impression of An Weiwei? She thought about it and understood. Just by looking at her appearance, who would have thought that An Weiwei was such a person? She thought that Fang Yuhan had to remind her. Coincidentally, Fang Yuan took the opportunity to invite Fang Yuhan to have lunch together. Fang Yuhan was thinking of an excuse to decline. He felt the little guy in his pocket start to move. She seemed to want to crawl out. Through the thin fabric, Fang Yuhan gently patted Gu Xingyin, indicating for her to behave. However, Gu Xingyin would not cooperate this time. He couldn't climb out. She opened her mouth and called out. Meow. The soft meowing of the cat was extra obvious in the quiet office. Fang Yuhan paused for a moment. And Yuan and Weiwei both looked at him in confusion. Fang Yuhan's expression did not change as he reached into the pocket on the table and pulled out his restless little baby. A snow-white, palm-sized cub appeared in front of them. And Weiwei's eyes lit up. Chapter 1207. This is? She looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. Was this the kitten from yesterday? She was so beautiful. She looked at Gu Xingyin, her big eyes filled with undisguised love. And Yuan furrowed her brows. She was allergic to fur, so she had always hated cats and dogs. After placing Gu Xingyin on the desk, Fang Yuhan looked at the little girl in front of him, and his expression softened. This is Shirley, he said. And Weiwei impatiently took 2 steps forward and carefully approached Gu Xingyin. Is she the kitten from yesterday? I didn't expect her to look so good after she was washed. Hearing someone praise Shirley's beauty, Fang Yuhan felt like a parent who had been praised for their child. He felt extremely happy. Gu Xingyin rolled her eyes in her heart. She knew that Weiwei looked extremely happy when she saw her clothes, but she was actually thinking about bloody things. For example, how to peel off one's skin in an extremely beautiful manner, and let blood dye every inch of one's fur red. These were the things that Weiwei had done to the beautiful little animals in the original plot. And Weiwei had never seen such a beautiful and strange little thing. Because of her special and shameful hobby, she knew a lot about animals. However, she couldn't recognize the breed of the kitten in front of her. Perhaps it was a mixed breed? She couldn't help but take another step forward, wanting to reach out and touch Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin, who had been lying quietly on the desk, suddenly became irritable because of Weiwei's actions. Before anyone could react, she let out a few hurried screams and scratched the back of Weiwei's hand with her tender but extremely sharp little claws. Gu Xingyin didn't hold back at all. Bright red blood immediately appeared on Weiwei's right arm. Shirley. Fang Yuhan's eyes narrowed as he shouted in a deep voice. The little girl on the desk looked very anxious. Her snow-white fur stood on end. She squatted slightly and looked at Weiwei vigilantly. Yes, she was vigilant. It was as if this naive little girl was something terrifying. Fang Yuhan felt that he saw a strong sense of panic in his little white ball's eyes. This made him very uneasy. Although it seemed like he was reprimanding Shirley, only Fang Yuhan himself knew that he was actually worried about Shirley. Although they had only known each other for a day, Fang Yuhan could tell that Shirley was very gentle and clingy. Shirley was very obedient in front of him and Assistant Lu. Why did she become like this when she saw Weiwei? Weiwei, what's wrong? And Yuan was shocked by the scene just now. When she regained her senses, she hurriedly walked in front of Weiwei. She was a little anxious. After all, she was her own niece. She had brought her out and accidentally let her get hurt. She had never liked or even hated cats and dogs. Seeing this, she immediately scolded, "You damned little bastard, Missin." Fang Yuhan shouted and interrupted her. "Let's take your niece to the doctor first." He didn't look very scary, but Yuan's eyes trembled. She swallowed her words. She looked at her frightened niece with concern. "Weiwei, don't be afraid. Let's go to the hospital first." Chapter 1208. Logically speaking, as the owner, Fang Yuhan should personally accompany Weiwei to the hospital for a checkup when his pet hurt someone. However, he was being rude today. Because Shirley didn't look well. And Yuan was worried about her niece, so she had no choice but to suppress her anger towards Gu Xingyin. When she saw that Fang Yuhan had no intention of getting up, she snorted angrily and left with Weiwei. When Weiwei recovered, she would definitely come again. And Weiwei kept her head down and remained silent. And Yuan thought that her niece was frightened. She thought for a moment and comforted her. "Weiwei, don't be afraid. Auntie will take you to the hospital now. Nothing will happen." Does it still hurt? For example, she felt sorry for her niece. She was more worried about how she would explain this to her parents. The two elders only had one granddaughter, An Weiwei. Of course, they doted on her like she was their precious baby. If they found out that An Weiwei had gotten injured after taking her out, she might be scolded again. An Weiwei raised her head when she heard this. And Yuan noticed that her face was slightly red. An Weiwei shook her head and said softly, "Auntie, don't worry. It doesn't hurt." After she finished speaking, she lowered her head again. Her shoulder-length hair fell down and covered the side of her face. How could it not hurt? A sharp pain came from the wound. If An Yuan could see her niece's eyes at this moment, she would definitely be shocked. Was such a crazy and twisted expression really something that a teenage girl could have? An Weiwei felt her face burning. However, it wasn't because of the pain. It was because of excitement. She thought of the kitten again. It was so small and looked so weak and harmless. However, when it reached out its sharp claws towards her, its movements were so unhesitant. It was really too beautiful. If An Weiwei was only very interested in Gu Xingyin before, now, she was determined to get it. Such a beautiful and fierce little thing, he really wanted to see it lying powerlessly in his palm, and cut off its sharp claws one by one, and stain its snow-white fur with a bright red color. It was really beautiful. It would definitely be more perfect than all of her works. In a place where no one could see, An Weiwei's lips curled up slightly. In Fang Yuhan's office. With the departure of the two An family members, Gu Xingyin seemed to relax a little, but she still looked a little panicked. Fang Yuhan's heart ached when he saw this. Yesterday, no matter how disheveled she was, she still held her head up proudly when he picked her up and stepped on his custom-made suit with her dirty little paws. How could it be like this? He could only soften his voice and call out slowly, "Shirley." Hearing his voice, the little white ball on the table trembled slightly. Fang Yuhan watched as she turned around and looked at him with her big, clear eyes. He meowed softly. He felt extremely wronged. He was like a little guy who had been bullied outside and finally found his backer. She was the one who used her claws to scratch him. Fang Yuhan felt that he was the right parent. At this time, Shirley should be reprimanded very severely and let Shirley understand that her behavior was wrong. But this was just a hypothesis. When he met her wet eyes, he said honestly, "It's cold on the table. Come here." Chapter 1209. Fang Yuhan watched as the little white ball's ears twitched. Clearly, she had heard what he said. However, she hesitated and didn't throw herself into his arms like before when she heard his voice. Such a realization made him a little unhappy. However, Fang Yuhan did not show it on his face. He could tell that Shirley had been agitated. At a time like this, he could not scare her anymore. His voice became gentler, and there was even a smile on his face. "Shirley, be a good girl. Come to me." His voice was gentle, and so was his person. Gu Xingyin felt that he was almost done with his act, so he finally moved slowly towards Fang Yuhan and climbed onto Fang Yuhan's open hand. When the little white ball returned to his palm, Fang Yuhan did not notice that he heaved a sigh of relief. He had been afraid earlier. He was afraid that this little girl would no longer be close to him. Fang Yuhan was in a good mood when he felt her little body rubbing against his palm and licking it tentatively. She was his obedient and clingy little Shirley. Perhaps because Fang Yuhan's scent was too familiar, the little white ball, who had been a little uneasy earlier, slowly calmed down when she returned to his palm. Soon, she returned to her usual self. She lay lazily in his palm and occasionally swept her fluffy tail lazily, making Fang Yuhan's heart itch. No one could tell that a few minutes ago, this little girl was lying on the table and shivering. Fang Yuhan thought for a moment and said, "Shirley, you can't just scratch people." He still had to say what he needed to say. Gu Xingyin expressed that she didn't understand. As a spiritual beast, how could she understand the human language, meow? Fang Yuhan was helpless. Even though he did not know whether Shirley was a cat or not, he could tell that she could understand him. This little girl was simply too smart. He felt that he should emphasize some things, such as not attacking others. What if the person she scratched got angry and accidentally hurt Shirley when he was not by her side? Wait a minute. President Fong, isn't there something wrong with your logic? According to Fong Yuhan's usual style, if an employee made a mistake, he would let the other party know. He could not bear the consequences of such a mistake. But if it was Shirley, Fong Yuhan sighed inwardly. Even if she panicked a little, he would have to worry for a long time, let alone punish her. He couldn't bear to do it. Forget it. President Fong didn't even hesitate for a minute before he gave up on the idea of punishing his little white dumpling. In the worst-case scenario, he would just stay by her side and watch over her. Moreover, Shirley was so obedient, so there must be a reason why she was so irritable today. Thinking of this, his eyes darkened. Shirley had always been very calm, but when the little girl from the family reached out to touch her, she suddenly became irritable. Moreover, looking at Shirley's appearance, she didn't seem to have gone mad. Instead, it was as if she had encountered something that terrified her. He could clearly see that Shirley's body had been trembling ever since she scratched in Weiwei. Rather than being ferocious, she seemed more like, afraid. What was it about that innocent and beautiful little girl from the family that made Shirley afraid? He was somewhat puzzled. Chapter 12:10. During lunch that day, Fong Yuhan asked Assistant Lu to hug his little white dumpling. As expected, Gu Xingyin was still lying quietly in Assistant Lu's palm. She was not as irritable as she was in front of An Weiwei. CEO Fong, who was biased, immediately felt that what happened today was not his little white dumpling's fault. It must be that the little girl from the family had something on her that provoked Shirley. That was why she was so uneasy. However, no matter what he thought, it was a fact that Shirley had scratched the little girl from the family. Therefore, Fong Yuhan asked Assistant Lu to send a lot of tonics to An Weiwei. He also said that he was willing to pay for all the treatment and follow-up expenses. In the end, he said that he was very sorry for letting the little girl from the family suffer such an accident. Yes, he said it was an accident. His attitude made it clear that today's incident had nothing to do with his cat. Hearing Assistant Lu's words, An Yuan was so angry that she could not keep her expression straight. She thought that if Fong Yuhan was sincere, he would at least come to see Weiwei in person. However, not only did he not come, but he even tried to excuse his cat. Accident? She said coldly, I saw with my own eyes that Weiwei was scratched by Mr. Fong's cat. I don't know why you said it was an accident. Assistant Lu smiled and said, Our president's cat, Shirley, is famous for her gentle and obedient temper. Today, she suddenly became irritable when she saw Missin. I guess it was because of their auras. If it wasn't an accident, then what was it? This was utter nonsense. And Yuan was trembling with anger. She never thought that the president of the Fong family, who was rumored to be cold and restrained, would do such a thing for a cat. Wasn't it just a cat? She didn't say anything. What was wrong with admitting her mistake and apologizing? Unfortunately, Assistant Lu completely understood what her boss meant. You want Shirley to be the scapegoat? I feel sorry for Shirley. In the end, Assistant Lu was invited out by An Yuan with a dark face. She sat down angrily and said, No, I can't take this lying down. How can I let Weiwei suffer such a big grievance? In fact, she felt uncomfortable in her heart, but it was far from this point. These words were mainly for An Weiwei. Since her niece had suffered, as her aunt, she naturally had to pretend to be extremely distressed. In her heart, she did not want to fall out with Fong Yuhan over a cat and her niece. After all, she had yet to find a marriage partner that she was more satisfied with than Fong Yuhan. And Weiwei sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her aunt. She could more or less guess what her aunt was thinking at this moment. It was nothing more than trying to please her while not falling out with the Fong family. Humph, what a stupid woman. Why didn't she ever think about whose daughter An Weiwei was? No matter how cold her relationship with her father was, they were still related by blood. Her father would inherit the family business in the future, and sooner or later, she would be the only heir to the family property. However, An Yuan would have her own children in the future. Naturally, she would leave her things to her children. What made this woman think that she could rely on such a small favor to make him give up the benefits at the tip of his tongue to help her? Did he really think that she was a naive fool? And Weiwei lowered her eyes to conceal the coldness in her eyes. Chapter 12:11. An Yuan was still speaking angrily when An Weiwei suddenly raised her head. She looked at An Yuan with a quiet smile. "Auntie, don't be angry. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt much." An Yuan immediately shut her mouth. She hurriedly looked at An Weiwei. "Are you really okay?" An Weiwei nodded. "Yes. Also, don't blame Shirley. She's so cute. Maybe she's a little timid and was scared by me." That beautiful little thing was called Shirley. She had heard it from Fong Yuhan. Shirley. This name suited her appearance. When An Yuan heard her niece's words, she remembered that her silly little niece had always liked kittens and puppies. It was said that when she saw stray cats and dogs, she couldn't help but take them back out of kindness. However, An Yuan didn't know why she had never seen any animals when she went to the Fong family's villa. Since An Weiwei didn't blame her, An Yuan was relieved. However, she still pretended to be in a difficult position. "But Mom and Dad will still ask about your wound when they see it." Then, that kitten, she deliberately slowed down her words. As expected, she heard her little niece nervously interrupt her. "Auntie, please don't say anything. I will tell Grandpa and Grandma that I accidentally fell when I went out to play." And Yuan nodded in satisfaction. This silly little niece was indeed smart. Little did she know that An Weiwei was also sneering and scolding her in her heart. She put on a longing expression. "Shirley is really beautiful. I've always wanted such a beautiful cat." And Yuan thought about it for a moment. Even though she really hated furry animals, she had to admit that the little white cat called Shirley was indeed very beautiful. Looking at her niece's expression and thinking about how understanding she was just now, An Yuan didn't know why, but her heart was moved. She blurted out, "Isn't it just a cat? Weiwei, just you wait. Auntie will definitely get it for you." As soon as she said this, she regretted it. Today, when she saw Fong Yuhan's expression in the CEO's office, she knew that the little white cat held a lot of weight in his heart. It wasn't an easy task to get the little white cat from him. Not to mention, she had nothing to do with Fong Yuhan. Her reputation as the eldest daughter of the An family was not worth much in front of the president of the Fong Corporation. But before she could change her words, she heard her niece's excited voice. "Really? Auntie, you're so nice. Weiwei likes you the most." And Yuan silently swallowed the words that she was about to say. Looking at her niece's innocent smile, big fog, and Yuan had a feeling that if she didn't agree to her niece's request, she would be extremely evil. She got up to cover An Weiwei with the blanket and said, "Have a good rest then. Aunt won't disturb you anymore." An Weiwei's eyes were still sparkling. She hurriedly nodded and closed her eyes obediently. And Yuan didn't know that after she left the room and closed the door, the girl on the bed opened her eyes again. How could An Weiwei, who was lying on the bed, still be so innocent and adorable? Her large black eyes were pitch black, as if they were an endless expanse of darkness. She said softly, "Don't let me down, my aunt." Chapter 12:12. Ever since Shirley grabbed someone in a fit of rage, Fong Yuhan had become even more attentive to her. At first, he kept her in his pocket so that no one could see her, so as not to ruin his image as a cold CEO. But now, he didn't care anymore. That's right. From one day, the employees of the Fong Corporation saw their CEO go to work with a cute little kitten on his shoulder. The aloof CEO and the delicate and soft little kitten, this combination strangely formed a kind of contrast adorable. Every time the girls in the company saw this scene, they wanted to scream. Oh, so the CEO was actually this kind of CEO. He was always expressionless, but when he was with his little kitten, he would show his unique gentleness. He was simply too cool. In their hearts, they secretly thought about the 1001 nights between their CEO and his little kitten. When they faced Fang Yuhan again, they felt that he wasn't as scary as before. How could someone who could show such gentleness to a little kitten be a cold and heartless person? System. What was the logic behind this conclusion? Humans really couldn't understand. Another thing that made the girls want to scream was that the CEO's little kitten was simply too cute. Not to mention her palm-sized body, her snow-white fur, and her large purple eyes, not to mention that extremely foul fluffy tail. It simply made people want to bring everything in front of her, only hoping that she would act cute in front of them. It was no wonder that the usually cold and heartless CEO had become a cat lover. Who wouldn't want such a cute little kitten? In less than 10 days, President Fang had been asked by at least dozens of people openly and secretly about where he had bought Shirley from. Everyone said that Shirley was a little princess. That's right, in 10 days, Gu Xingyin's name had successfully spread throughout the company, and that it was very expensive. However, if they could have such a beautiful and clingy little fairy, they could eat dirt for half a year. How could CEO Fang not see that these people were all coveting his Shirley? He was very unhappy, but at the same time, he secretly revealed a trace of pride in his heart. Because no matter what other people thought, Shirley was still his. She still liked him the most. Gu Xingyin, wasn't it all because someone was too jealous and possessive? As a gentle-tempered summoned beast, Gu Xingyin wasn't afraid of strangers at all. As long as she could sense friendliness from others, she didn't mind being hugged, kissed, and raised high. She did mind being kissed a little. But he couldn't stand President Fang's jealousy. Every time Gu Xingyin was hugged by someone, she could feel the cold air and obvious displeasure emanating from Fang Yuhan. Obviously, even though she was just a cat, Fang Yuhan's possessiveness towards her did not decrease at all. Realizing this, Gu Xingyin, who didn't want her lover to be unhappy, began to consciously reduce her contact with others. When faced with humans who liked her, she would at most call out to them in a soft voice and no longer interact with others. Moreover, she became even more clingy to Fang Yuhan. Gu Xingyin saw the satisfied smile on her owner's face. She could feel her owner's joy. Gu Xingyin felt a sweet sadness in her heart. Sigh, master loves me too much. He doesn't even allow me to interact with other humans. Such a capricious CEO is really worrying. It's over. Sigh, it's so sweet. I'm a little sad, weathered face. Congratulations to Filthy Li Wuxin for becoming the second leader of this article. Then, I'd like to thank my babies for the tips and tickets that they gave to Gigi. Finally, I'd like to ask for tickets. Don't forget the recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 12-13. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. In this month, little Princess Shweli successfully gained the favor of the entire Fang Corporation. When humans faced cats, they didn't have much rationality to begin with. Not to mention, it was a pseudo-cat psychic beast that had its own attributes. Gu Xingyin also asked the system to keep an eye on An Weiwei. During this period of time, An Weiwei had been feeling very bad and was in a very irritated mood. This was because her grandparents, who had been living in the old house, had come over. Strictly speaking, the villa An Weiwei lived in was bought after her parents moved out alone after they got married. It was just that the couple didn't have any feelings for each other, so An Weiwei was the only owner living in this so-called love nest. How nice it was to be alone. Even though An Weiwei was only in her teens, she was still the owner of this huge villa. She said that she didn't like others going up to the second floor of the villa. That was her private space, and no one in the entire villa dared to go against her wishes. But now, it was different. She didn't know why the two people who had been living in the old house all year round suddenly came over. And Weiwei was a little confused as she looked at the grandmother with black hair who didn't look old. She cried when she saw her and hugged her while calling out to her. The content was nothing more than nonsense like, "My poor granddaughter." And Weiwei didn't know what had happened, but when she saw the two big shots of the An family looking at her with a loving gaze that she had never seen before, she instantly knew that this was her chance. And Weiwei, who had matured early, knew that the love from the elders was the biggest guarantee for her status in this family. In the An family, there was nothing more important than gaining the favor of the two elders. Although her grandparents had always treated her well, they had never looked at her with such a gaze as if she was the apple of their eye. She was very obedient. In the eyes of the two elders who were over 50 years old, this granddaughter was so sensible because no one doted on her at such a young age. Didn't they see that so-and-so child who was the same age as their Weiwei? He was a classic example of a devil incarnate. Actually, the reason why the two elders of the Yin family were like this was because of the system's help. The older a person got, the more they would believe in supernatural things. A few nights ago, both husband and wife had the same dream. In the dream, their only pitiful granddaughter would wake up every night with her eyes open until dawn. Their parents would hug their new lovers and turn a blind eye to this. It would have been fine if it was just a dream, but both of them had the same dream. The two elders of the Yin family looked at each other and felt that this was a warning to them. Thus, they arrived at An Weiwei's villa early in the morning. At first, An Weiwei thought that this was a good thing for her. However, she quickly dismissed that thought. Because her grandparents didn't say a word and directly stayed here. Anyway, the villa was big and everything was available. In order to show their closeness, the two elders even specially chose their own bedroom to be next to An Weiwei's. This made An Weiwei suffer. Because of her shameful hobby, she had always lived alone on the second floor. But now, there were two more people, and they were the kind that couldn't be rejected. One could only imagine how aggrieved An Weiwei felt. Chapter 12-14. This was because the two retired elders did not have much to do every day. Every time An Weiwei came back from school, she would be dragged out by the two of them to play, buy things, and choose gifts. It had been a long time since she went to her private room. An Weiwei knew that her little hobbies would not be recognized by the world. Once her grandparents found out about what she had done, she believed that no matter how much they loved her, they would not tell anyone about it. The way they looked at her would change from love to disgust and even fear. She could not take this risk. So, she had to endure it. No matter how much she longed for it and how eager she was, she had to endure it. When Gu Xingyin received the message from the system, she was very satisfied. Before she came to this world, she could not care about An Weiwei's matters. But since she had come to this world in place of the real Shueli, she would not allow such things to happen. So, An Weiwei, don't you like to pretend to be an obedient and innocent little girl? Then I'll just keep pretending. However, Gu Xingyin didn't expect that An Weiwei's violent desires, which he had forcefully suppressed, would one day erupt with such ferocity. Yuhan, Misson, please call me Mr. Fang. Gu Xingyin lazily leaned against the bookshelf in Fang Yuhan's office and watched the man and woman in front of her communicate. And Yuan hadn't come back for almost a month after she had been driven away by Fang Yuhan. Gu Xingyin thought that An Yuan was really a hot-tempered young lady. She did not expect that she would only be reserved for a month. In fact, this was indeed the case. An Yuan waited for a month. Apart from Assistant Lu's call to ask for compensation, she did not receive any calls from the Fang Corporation. She had to admit that if she did not take the initiative, Fang Yuhan would not remember her at all. She had never felt this kind of frustration from any man before. However, she also understood in her heart that such a man would not be interested in her, An Yuan. Similarly, he would not be very interested in other women. After all, An Yuan was still a woman. Although she was open-minded and did not have high expectations of a relationship between a man and a woman. However, she still hoped that she could find a boyfriend or even a husband who treated her well. A clean and honest man, and a prodigal son who wandered among flowers. If marriage was the prerequisite, most women would still be willing to choose the former. However, this was all her wishful thinking. From the beginning to the end, Fang Yuhan had no interest in An Yuan at all. He was just maintaining the basic courtesy of a man to a lady. Just as she opened her mouth, she hit a nail on the head. What An Yuan said in her heart was true. However, she thought of her promise to her niece and secretly comforted herself. This isn't the first day I know this man's character. It's okay, An Yuan. There aren't many unmarried girls like you in S City. You have a great chance of success. Fang Yuhan was actually very impatient with this woman. He tried his best to maintain a gentle tone. "Missin, why are you here?" And Yuan thought for a moment and saw Gu Xingyin, who was lazily lying down and playing with her tail. Her eyes lit up as she said to Fang Yuhan, "I'm here to see Shirley." She knew how much Fang Yuhan treasured this cat. Chapter 12:15. She originally thought that talking about this cat would allow her to continue chatting with Fang Yuhan. However, it was obvious that she was wrong. When Fang Yuhan heard the words Shirley from in Yuhan's mouth, the calmness that he was trying to maintain completely disappeared. Fang Yuhan said calmly, "In that case, I'll thank Missin for your concern on behalf of Shirley." What tricks was this woman trying to play this time? And Yuan did not like Shirley at all. Fang Yuhan knew about this from the start. The way Yuan looked at Shirley was as though she was looking at a bad thing. And Yuan was at a loss for words. She did not expect Fang Yuhan to have such an attitude when she mentioned Shirley. Fang Yuhan's cold and vigilant gaze made him look like a ferocious beast protecting its cub. Yes, that was the only description Yuan could think of. As for her, she was the enemy in the eyes of the ferocious beast. She was someone he had to be wary of. When Yuan thought of this, she felt inexplicably unhappy. Could it be that he was afraid that he would harm such a small thing? Thinking of her niece, Yuan thought for a moment and said, "Mr. Fang, didn't Shirley accidentally scratch Wei Wei last time? Wei Wei has always been obedient and kind. She also likes small animals the most. She doesn't blame Shirley at all. Of course, I've always told her that Shirley is a very obedient kitten and that she didn't do it on purpose." As she spoke, she glanced at Fang Yuhan's expression. However, she could not see any emotion on his face. She gritted her teeth and said, "But Wei Wei can't forget the beautiful Shirley. As Wei Wei's aunt, I would like to ask Mr. Fang if you can let Shirley stay with Wei Wei for a few days." Gu Xingyin's ears perked up when she heard this. Of course, she did not believe in Yuan's words. And Wei Wei couldn't forget her? What she said was probably true, but only Wei Wei herself knew what it was that she couldn't forget. This little pervert still hadn't given up on her. She was not worried at all. Based on her understanding of her owner, Fang Yuhan would not be willing to lend her out for others to play with. Sure enough, Fang Yuhan rejected her without hesitation. "I'm sorry, Missin, but our Shueli is very shy." As you can see, Shueli reacted instinctively because she was frightened by Miss and Wei Wei last time. For the sake of both Shirley and Miss and Wei Wei, it's better not to let them meet. And Yuan did not expect that the other party would not even find an excuse and reject her so thoroughly. She opened her mouth. "But Wei Wei really likes Shirley." Fang Yuhan didn't answer her, but his meaning was obvious. "Your niece likes Shirley, so I should lend Shirley to her?" "I'm sorry, but I don't accept that logic." And Yuan had been given the cold shoulder here, and with Fang Yuhan's cold attitude, it was impossible to communicate with him. She had no choice but to pick up her bag and leave in a huff. Meow. After Yuan left, a small white shadow suddenly jumped from the bookshelf onto the head of a man in a suit with a serious expression. A serious man and a soft and cute little white cat. This combination was so contrasting that it made people laugh. Fang Yuhan's expression softened immediately. He said helplessly, "Shirley, how many times have I told you not to jump around? What if you fall?" Chapter 12:16. He continued, "Also, you can't climb on top of my head. Have you forgotten?" Although he said this, he did not reach out to take the little fellow off his head. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, opened his mouth and meowed. He obediently jumped from Fang Yuhan's head to his shoulder and landed on Fang Yuhan's open palm. She looked at Fang Yuhan with her big, dark purple eyes as if to say, "Look, am I not obedient?" Fang Yuhan could not help but lower his head and kiss her beautiful eyes. "Shirley is the most obedient." "Of course." Little Princess Shueli meowed twice and wagged her fluffy tail in Fang Yuhan's hand as a reward. Fang Yuhan looked at Shirley and felt his heart soften. Whether it was the quiet Shirley, the proud Shirley, or the naughty Shirley, they were all cute in his eyes. At this moment, Fang Yuhan completely understood how the cat slaves felt. It was a wonderful thing to have such a little princess in the family. He started to deal with the company's affairs. Gu Xingyin lay quietly on his lap and took a nap. In fact, she was chatting with the system. In this world, so many people liked Shirley. Apart from her exquisite and cute appearance, there was another important reason. The skill she had obtained in this world was the natural affinity of the elf queen. It did not matter whether it was for animals or plants. Humans were a type of high-level animal, so it was normal for them to have a good impression of her. Moreover, as a type of high-grade spirit beast, spiritual beasts had a physique that couldn't tolerate impurities. Their auras were pure and they would naturally be very popular. I can already feel the power in my body increasing, Gu Xingyin said to the system. The system's white light flashed. Yes, host. The spiritual beast's infancy is only a year. During this period, the power in the spiritual beast's bloodline will continue to awaken. Gu Xingyin thought for a while and asked, when can I transform into a human? Although Shirley was loved by everyone, there was not much she could do as a cat. After the host passes the spiritual beast's infancy. After entering the growth stage, the spiritual beast will have the ability to transform. A year wasn't too hard to endure. Gu Xingyin nodded. In this world, she had never thought of transforming into a human in front of Fang Yuhan. This was because the spiritual beast's ending would not be too good. As a spiritual beast that should not belong to this world, Shirley came to this world for a reason. She had her own mission to complete. It was because An Weiwei had assassinated the spiritual beast, which was still in its infancy and could not protect itself, that caused her to be unable to complete her mission. That was why Gu Xingyin came to this world and restored the originally disrupted plot to normal. If she was just a cute little kitten in Fang Yuhan's eyes, then, even if she left, he would at most be sad for a while. Perhaps he would even raise a palm-sized white kitten and forget about her for a while. But if she transformed into a human, Gu Xingyin was almost certain that her lover would fall in love with her. This was the bond between their souls. The pain of losing a loved one was much heavier than losing a pet. Read the remaining 4 chapters before 12 o'clock a.m. Speaking of which, do you guys smell the fragrance of glass shards? Serious face, then, do you really want to hit me? Come on, hit me to death with your violent votes. Chapter 12-17. Fang Yuhan, who was focused on handling the company's affairs, didn't know that his little princess Shirley was thinking about such serious matters. He also didn't know that he was facing the risk of losing Shirley. All Gu Xingyin wanted to do was to stick to him a little more before that day arrived. On the other side. After having dinner with her grandparents, the 3 of them took a walk in the garden. And Weiwei finally couldn't help but use the excuse that she was sleepy and returned to her room. Her room was like the room of all rich girls. It was full of luxury and princess style. It was the dream of any little girl. She didn't like it. However, everyone felt that An Weiwei should like this style. It wasn't just her room. The clothes she wore, her jewelry, and even her school bag were all in this dreamy Lolita style. Even An Weiwei herself could convince herself that she liked this style under her own self-hypnosis day after day. This was because her elders liked this cute and obedient little princess. Only now, when there was no one else around, she could freely release the true desires in her heart. She put away the innocent smile on her face, took off her pink lace princess dress, and changed into a pure white nightgown. And Weiwei, who was sitting on the bed, looked like a completely different person from how she looked during the day. Her face was expressionless, and her big black eyes gave off a strange vibe under the dim light. The desire that she suppressed in her heart during the day gradually awakened. There seemed to be a fire burning in the bottom of her heart. She was thirsty and anxious, and her eyes became a little wild. It was so uncomfortable. She needed something to quell this desire that was growing stronger and stronger. She didn't need to endure it again. What did she need? She felt that she urgently needed to see blood. She needed to see those young and desperate eyes. She needed to feel the warm blood flowing through her palms and hear the miserable cries in her ears. It gave her the satisfaction of dominating the other party's world. But she couldn't. Her grandparents lived in the room next door. She couldn't let them see this side of their obedient granddaughter. She could only endure it. In this long night, under the torment of time, this burning impulse was gradually suppressed. Her nails dug deep into her flesh, but Weiwei didn't even frown. Only pain could slightly suppress the madness in her heart. The hour hand turned little by little. Finally, after 2 rounds, the burning desire in his heart gradually calmed down. Weiwei lowered her head. Unsurprisingly, she saw that her left forearm was already stained with blood. She had scratched it with her fingernails just now. Looking at the dried marks, she walked forward and licked them gently. It had a salty, rusty taste, and was not tasty at all. However, Weiwei seemed to be possessed. She licked all the traces clean bit by bit. The flame in his heart finally disappeared completely. The taste was actually not bad. She slowly got up and walked to the side of the huge dressing mirror. The girl in the mirror was wearing a loose white nightgown. Her hair was loose, and her expressionless face gave off a strange feeling in the dim light. Chapter 12:18. She stared at herself in the mirror. Slowly, the corners of her mouth curled up. The haze in her eyes also quietly dissipated. She reached out to turn on the light beside the mirror, and the entire room instantly lit up. The little girl in the mirror became the innocent and obedient little princess of the Yin family that day. Everything that had just happened could only be witnessed by this silent room full of furniture. No, other than this room full of furniture, there was also a system. Looking at Weiwei like this, the experienced and knowledgeable system expressed that it didn't care. What the hell? The system expressed that it was very scared. The system didn't only have Gu Xingyin as a host, it had also seen all kinds of perverts in previous missions. But it really hadn't seen anyone as sick as Weiwei. The system could face ghosts and monsters covered in blood without batting an eyelid, but facing Weiwei like this, it expressed that it was a little weak. But the system was a good system that loved its job. Even if it was a little scared, it still insisted on being on the front line, continuously monitoring the mission target. It was determined not to affect the completion of the host's mission because of its own fear. Let's give a round of applause to the dedicated system. Alright, back to the main topic. Weiwei lay quietly on the bed. The room fell into darkness. She clearly knew her situation. She could endure it once, twice, or even 10 times. But 100 times? It was very obvious that the two from the Yin family had the intention of staying here for a long time. Weiwei knew that there was a crazy beast in her heart. Only the blood of those weak animals could extinguish the desire in her heart. She couldn't control the ambition in her heart. If she continued to endure like this, sooner or later, there would be problems. Since she couldn't help it, then, it wouldn't be at home, right? Although it was impossible to have as much equipment outside as at home, and the products might not be perfect. But as long as it could temporarily satisfy the desire in her heart, it would be fine. Weiwei made up her mind. If she didn't do something, she would really go crazy. Gu Xingyin received the system's warning in her mind. The system had no way of knowing what Weiwei was thinking, but it could guess that her current situation wasn't normal. It mainly wanted Gu Xingyin to be careful. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, was more thoughtful than the system. After hearing the system describe Weiwei's series of actions, she felt that the other party might not be able to hold it in any longer. Now that she was by Fang Yuhan's side every day, it was unlikely that Weiwei would be able to come into contact with her. System, you don't have to worry too much about me. The main thing is to monitor Weiwei's actions. I suspect that she wants to attack the animals outside. Especially those stray cats and dogs without owners, they were the best targets. In the past, too many of the animal souls under Weiwei's control were those pitiful stray animals. Understood, host. Gu Xingyin was still deep in thought when her body was suddenly held up by a pair of warm and dry hands. What's wrong with Shirley? Are you feeling unwell? A voice with a hint of anxiety came from above. Fang Yuhan was so immersed in his work that he didn't realize that Shirley, who had always been clingy, had been too quiet the entire afternoon. Normally, she couldn't stay still. Every now and then, she would poke him with her claws to play with him. Gu Xingyin snapped out of her thoughts and met her owner's worried gaze. Chapter 12:19. Her eyes were as cold as the clear water in an unfrozen lake in winter all year round, but when she looked at him, her eyes were as warm as the sun. Gu Xingyin meowed softly, stood up, and gently licked Fang Yuhan's wrist. Then, she moved closer to Fang Yuhan. Fang Yuhan was relieved. It seemed that Shirley was fine. However, he still felt that this place was too quiet. President Fang felt as if he was sick. When Shirley pestered him to play with her, he kept praying that this clingy little girl would be quiet. However, when she was really quiet, Fang Yuhan began to worry again. He was even inexplicably not used to it. He began to miss Shirley, who always liked to pester him. After playing with Shirley in his arms for a while, he felt that she was not very interested. Fang Yuhan glanced at the clock on the wall worriedly. There was still an hour before he got off work. Today's work was basically done. He thought for a minute, stood up decisively, and began to pack his things. As soon as he put Shirley on his shoulder, he met Assistant Lu, who pushed the door open and came in. Assistant Lu was still holding a pile of documents in her hands. She looked at the president in surprise. "President, what are you doing?" Assistant Lu was a little confused. Fang Yuhan looked calm. "I still have something to do. I'm off work." He glanced at the documents in Assistant Lu's hands again and frowned slightly. "Is there any urgent and important information that I need to see?" Assistant Lu quickly shook her head. No, these are just some parts of the plan. You can take your time to read them." Then, there was no problem. Fang Yuhan nodded. "Then, I'll leave first." Assistant Lu stood in the president's office with a pile of documents in her arms. Her heart was still full of disbelief. The CEO was actually promoted and dismissed from his position. This was even rarer than the company's year-end bonus twice a year. President Fang was simply a role model in the world of presidents. He always worked overtime. At least, Assistant Lu had worked here for 2.5 years, and she had never seen him leave work early. In just a few minutes, Assistant Lu thought of hundreds of reasons for the president to skip work. However, none of them seemed right. She shook her head and shook all the messy thoughts out of her mind. She could only think about the president's gossip in her heart. It was not good to delay her work. As for after the work was done, Assistant Lu smiled like an idiot. "I have more gossip to share with my girlfriend." However, Fang Yuhan was fine. After he left the company, he took Gu Xingyin directly to the most famous pet hospital in the city. Yes, he was worried that Shirley was sick. However, the results of the examination surprised even the doctor. "Sir, I can tell that you've taken good care of your kitten," the vet said with a smile as he looked at Fang Yuhan. Most of the people who chose to become veterinarians maintained a friendly and loving heart towards small animals. When they saw people who were also kind to their pets, their attitude would naturally be much gentler. "I've never seen such a healthy pet. There was nothing wrong with it at all." Hearing this, Gu Xingyin remained silent. The bodies of spiritual beasts were the purest, without any impurities. Naturally, they would be incomparably healthy. Chapter 12:20. Fang Yuhan was relieved to hear this. He looked at the veterinarian gently and said, "Thank you." The veterinarian smiled and said, "You're welcome. There aren't many owners who love their pets as much as you do." The veterinarian clicked his tongue in wonder. Fang Yuhan looked like a cold person who didn't like to smile. He didn't expect him to be so nice to his pets. Indeed, one couldn't judge a book by its cover. Fang Yuhan knew that there was nothing wrong with Shirley's health, but he didn't know what was wrong with her. Gu Xingyin perked up when she saw the worried look in her owner's eyes. She meowed at Fang Yuhan a few times and scratched his body with her little paws. That's how it should be. Seeing Xue Li's energetic appearance, Fang Yuhan's heart relaxed. "Let's go. Let's have a big meal today." Fang Yuhan went to a famous restaurant in the city. Since it was inconvenient to bring Shirley along, he ordered a private room. The dishes were served quickly. In order to take care of Shirley, Fang Yuhan ordered a lot of light dishes. For one person, it was a little too much. The waiter asked him more than once if he wanted more bowls and chopsticks. Of course, Fang Yuhan refused. What did it feel like to eat with a cat slave owner? Gu Xingyin could tell you that she was treated like a queen. Fang Yuhan didn't eat at all. He wanted to satisfy his little princess first. Gu Xingyin said that as long as she liked something, she would look over and meow. The next moment, that dish would be served to her. At first, Fang Yuhan was worried that Shirley would feel uncomfortable eating human food. However, as time passed, he realized that Shirley wasn't an ordinary cat. Although she looked like a delicate kitten, Shirley wasn't as delicate as those kittens. Fang Yuhan had thought about what kind of animal Shirley was, but he didn't care much. To him, Shirley was Shirley. He liked her so much because she was a cat. If she wasn't a cat, he wouldn't like her. Shirley had a big appetite. This was what Fang Yuhan had learned over the past 2 months. Of course, this was in comparison to the size of an ordinary cat and her body. Compared to humans, this little bit of appetite was really nothing. The bodies of spiritual beasts were very strange. Throughout their infancy, they would maintain the same body shape. In other words, no matter how much Gu Xingyin could eat, her body would always be the size of a palm. However, Gu Xingyin did not care about this. She didn't think that a cat with a big head would be any more useful than a cat the size of a palm. As for Fang Yuhan, he didn't care at all. The palm-sized Shirley was so cute. He could hold her in his palm and put her in his pocket at any time. It couldn't be any better. Gu Xingyin quickly expressed that she was full. Only then did Fang Yuhan start eating. After the man and the cat had eaten their fill, Fang Yuhan thought about Shirley's previous state and decided to take her out to play. There shouldn't be too many people, and it shouldn't be too noisy. It would be best if it was closer to home, and the place had to be pretty. Fang Yuhan thought about it and chose a leisure park not far from home. This park was rare and had very few amusement facilities. Naturally, it wouldn't attract a large group of naughty children. The environment was indeed good. However, Gu Xingyin was lying in Fang Yuhan's pocket. As soon as they arrived at the destination, they heard a message from the system. It was in Weiwei. What was she doing here so late? Chapter 12:21. In the evening, the artificial lake reflected the orange-red setting sun. The sun had already lost its heat, covering the horizon with a layer of reddish-purple sunset. As it reflected in the water, the gorgeous colors slowly swayed with the slight ripples, as if creating a magnificent and mysterious world. Fang Yuhan had a small white ball on his shoulder. The man and the cat walked slowly in the evening breeze. To Fang Yuhan's surprise, he felt as if everything was peaceful. He thought that if he could spend the rest of his life with Shirley like this, it would be a good thing. However, the little white ball on his shoulder didn't seem to enjoy this as much as he did. She seemed a little irritable and uneasy tonight. Shirley? The little guy on his shoulder was different from before. This made Fang Yuhan a little uneasy. He took Gu Xingyin off his shoulder and placed her in his palm. What's wrong? Are you cold? Gu Xingyin meowed twice. She stuck out her tongue and licked his palm twice, indicating that she was fine. She had been talking to the system about An Weiwei. She felt that An Weiwei wasn't the kind of person who would come to see the scenery at night. Gu Xingyin thought about how An Weiwei couldn't come into contact with the small animals at home because of her interference recently. She had a faint guess in her heart. The system's reply confirmed her guess. Host, I just found that there are a large number of stray cats and dogs in this park. The system began to explain the situation of the park to Gu Xingyin. It turned out that Fang Yuhan and the others only knew that the scenery here was beautiful and that it was a good place to go for a leisurely stroll. However, they didn't know that this place was similar to a sacred place for the homeless stray cats and dogs. Most of the people who often came here for a walk were retired old people who stayed at home to play with their grandchildren. The old people were kind and had a certain amount of financial ability. They were very willing to bring some small food like bread and biscuits to feed these animals when they came here. There was no sun or rain, and no one would look at them with disgust or even chase them away. Over time, there were many small animals here. To Weiwei, this place was like a holy land, right? Gu Xingyin asked the system to keep an eye on Weiwei's movements while she struggled to jump out of Fang Yuhan's hands. Surely? Fang Yuhan let his guard down and let Shirley jump out of his hand. Then, he saw Cher's small white figure running off in a certain direction. Shirley, where are you going? Fang Yuhan asked anxiously. Ever since Shirley came to his side that rainy day, he had been holding her in the palm of his hand. He didn't even let her walk on her own. What on earth had happened? Fang Yuhan quickly chased after him. Gu Xingyin walked quickly. According to the system, Weiwei had already found the gathering place of those stray cats and dogs. She didn't want to see those innocent lives lost in the hands of this mentally twisted girl. In a dark corner of the park, Weiwei was holding a bag of cooked meat in her hand. She was squatting down and slowly placing it on the ground. There were several small round animals lying in front of her. These small animals were often fed by humans, so they weren't afraid of strangers. When they saw that this human had no intention of attacking them, they all surrounded her. Chapter 12:22. Weiwei had an innocent smile on her face, but her eyes were looking at these animals one by one. This one is too big and looks so fierce. That yellow-spotted one isn't good-looking at all. That little black cat looks sickly and lifeless. Her eyes lit up. Not far away, the little white cat that had been looking over with its eyes wide open appeared in her vision. The little white cat's fur was white and clean without any impurities. Its eyes were a faint blue, and it was very eye-catching among the stray cats and dogs. Even Weiwei, who had seen countless cats and dogs, had to admit that this little cat's appearance was really impeccable. It was probably only staying in this secluded small park and wasn't seen by anyone. Otherwise, it would have been adopted by those so-called cat lovers long ago, right? Weiwei knew very well in her heart. Especially those pampered little girls at home and those rich ladies who spent all day doing nothing but spending money, they liked this kind of little guy the most. Weiwei herself didn't really like this kind of white cat. Because they looked too delicate and couldn't withstand any torture at all. The reason why she was attracted to this little white cat was because the first time she saw it, she was reminded of Shirley, who had once scratched her. Thinking of Mr. Fang's white cat that even she couldn't afford to offend, Weiwei felt a little regretful. She had to admit that this little guy was definitely the most beautiful, most agile, and most energetic cat she had ever seen. It was also the one that moved her the most. No. Just thinking of that white cat's proud gaze made the hidden desire in her heart have the urge to be aroused. Thinking of this, she looked at the little white cat again. Although its appearance was quite different, it was better than nothing. Very good, she had found her target for today. She distributed the large handful of food in her hand to the cats and dogs in front of her and walked towards the little white cat with the bag that still had half of it left. The little white cat followed her footsteps and took a few steps back. Obviously, compared to her defenseless companions, she was much more vigilant against humans. But in front of delicious food and the scheming Weiwei, she couldn't maintain her vigilance for long. Weiwei smiled as she watched the little white cat approach her bit by bit. She hesitantly started to eat the food she placed on the ground. Very good. After a while, she stretched out her hand hesitantly and touched the little white cat's body. The white cat's body trembled at first. She seemed to be a little afraid. However, after realizing that this human had no ill intentions and that the touch was very comfortable, she relaxed and no longer cared about the hand on her back. Instead, she lowered her head and focused on eating. As expected of a little bastard, he was hooked by a little bit of food. Weiwei hid her thoughts and continued to smile as she looked at the little white cat who was focused on eating. By the time Gu Xingyin arrived, all she saw were the little animals surrounding her. Weiwei was nowhere to be seen. Too late. When these stray cats and dogs saw Gu Xingyin, they all surrounded her enthusiastically. Some even stuck out their tongues and wanted to lick her. Gu Shengyin dodged nimbly. She felt a little helpless. The bodies of spiritual beasts were pure and clean, and their auras were naturally loved by animals. In addition, with the addition of the elf queen's affinity, in the eyes of these cats and dogs, she was probably like their child. Chapter 12:23. System, quickly find Weiwei's location, Gu Shengyin said. After learning that Weiwei had taken away a little white cat, Gu Shengyin couldn't help but feel a little worried. The system quickly reported an address. What surprised Gu Shengyin was that it was actually in this park. However, it was much more remote than here. The trees there were dense. During the day, it could be said to be quiet. However, at night, it could only be considered gloomy. Basically, no one dared to go there at night. That's right. The things that Weiwei did were all shameful. It could only be done in a place like this. Gu Shengyin got rid of the small animals that clung to her and ran towards the place that the system mentioned. Fang Yuhan followed behind his Shirley. To be honest, he was shocked by his Shirley's stamina. Shirley had been running at this speed for more than 10 minutes from the lakeside where they were taking a stroll. This distance and intensity of exercise were nothing to Fang Yuhan, who trained all year round. However, Shirley was only so big. Fang Yuhan was a little worried. What had happened to make Shirley so anxious? Weiwei carried the little white cat in her arms and walked towards the dark. The little white cat was quite quiet at first. However, as time passed, it realized that it didn't recognize its surroundings anymore. It started to meow in panic. However, Weiwei ignored it. The little white cat began to struggle, but Weiwei firmly clamped down on its limbs. What? You want to leave? Since you ate my food, you have to be obedient and listen to me. She walked gently. The little white cat struggled even harder. Weiwei couldn't help but pinch the little white cat's body. Disobedient little thing, you have to be punished, Wu. The little white cat let out a painful cry. They finally arrived at their destination. Weiwei stopped in her tracks and stopped under a large tree. Under the tree was a small backpack. Inside was Weiwei's treasure. Opening the backpack, Weiwei took out a few things. It was unknown how she moved, but she easily bound the little white cat's limbs and even sealed her mouth. What a pity. I can't hear Meow's pleas for mercy. Weiwei seemed to be a little regretful. From her point of view, it was a very heartwarming and comforting thing to hear the desperate and painful cries of those small animals ringing in her ears. When she was at home, she would not shut her mouth. But here, in order to not let the animals' screams attract extra people, she could only reluctantly give up this pleasure. She took her hands out of the backpack and a pair of knives as thin as a cicada's wings appeared in her hands. The white cat's frightened eyes appeared in front of Weiwei. The look in his eyes made her extremely satisfied. Next, I'll use these 2 knives to love you dearly. Good girl. She extended the knife in her hand towards the little white cat's body. Meow. A sharp cry that belonged to Meow Meow sounded, seemingly with inexplicable anger. Before Weiwei could react to where the meowing came from, a white figure flashed before her eyes. Then, she felt a strong force colliding with her. Intense pain flashed across her face. She reached out and touched it. A salty and wet liquid flowed down. It was blood. Weiwei panicked. She saw the little white ball glaring at her angrily not far away. Was it that Shweli? Chapter 12:24. Why was she here? Weiwei panicked. She reflexively turned her head to look behind her. There was no one. Did she sneak out on her own? A stinging pain came from the wound on his face. Drops of blood could not be stopped and kept dripping down. Weiwei ignored the white cat on the ground. Instead, she looked at Gu Shengyin with a gaze that made the cat's hair stand on end. What a bad-tempered little thing. You left wounds on my body in the 2 times we met. She chuckled softly. You're the first one to make me, Weiwei, suffer twice. You have to compensate me well. Gu Shengyin glared at An Weiwei angrily. Seeing it in the plot and seeing it with her own eyes were two completely different concepts. Right now, right beside her, that pitiful little white cat was tightly tied up. Its mouth was tied shut, and its eyes were filled with terror as it stared ahead. Its white fur had already been stained with a trace of bright red. The knife in An Weiwei's hand was too fast. Just the slightest contact with the knife would cause a wound. Gu Shengyin reached out her teeth and bit off the tie on the white cat's mouth. The white cat's shrill voice instantly rang out in this quiet environment. Fang Yuhan, who had just run over, heard this voice and his heart skipped a beat. It was a cat's scream. Shirley was here just now. In his anxiety, he didn't realize that this voice didn't belong to his Shirley. Hearing the white cat's voice, An Weiwei frowned. Would it attract people here? She looked at Gu Shengyin. Little Shirley, do you know how long I've been thinking about you? She looked at Gu Shengyin with a strange gaze, as if she was looking at a treasure bestowed by the heavens. Do you see that little white cat? Actually, when I caught it, I was thinking about you. But now, the main character is here. The substitute can quickly die. Just as she was about to move her feet to catch the little white ball in front of her, a cold voice that was suppressing his anger sounded behind Leng Jin. Master? I didn't know that my Shirley had always been missed by Misson. At this moment, Fang Yuhan was furious. When he heard the cat's screams, his body went limp. Then, he ran over and heard An Weiwei's words. He looked at the knife in An Weiwei's hands, then looked at the tied-up white kitten with blood on its body beside his Shirley. How could he not understand? Who would have thought that the legendary innocent and well-behaved little princess of the Yin family was actually such a pervert? Fang Yuhan's heart was filled with lingering fear. What if he couldn't keep up with Shirley? What would An Weiwei do to Shirley? From her words, it was clear that she had been interested in Shirley for a long time. An Weiwei didn't expect Fang Yuhan to arrive so quickly. Her expression changed, and she threw the knife in her hand to the ground. She squatted on the ground and began to cry. Fang Yuhan looked at her coldly without any warmth in his eyes. This little trick. He had seen it all before. However, he didn't have the time to argue with An Weiwei now. Instead, he quickly walked to Gu Shengyin's side. He checked carefully from head to toe. After confirming that his cat was fine, he heaved a sigh of relief. He reached out and slapped Gu Shengyin hard. Who told you to run around? What if something happened? This time, he didn't show any mercy at all. He hit her hard. He was really worried to death in his heart just now. Chapter 12:25. Gu Shengyin meowed a little aggrievedly, but she did not dodge. She was at a lower position, so she could clearly see the panic hidden behind the anger in the man's eyes. He was really worried about her. Anyway, a spiritual beast's body was very strong, so it was fine to let him vent his anger. However, after hitting her twice, Fang Yuhan stopped. He couldn't bear to do it. He watched as the little white ball in front of him obediently curled up into a ball. Her body was trembling from the pain, but she did not dodge because it was him. His heart ached when he saw this. Fang Yuhan gritted his teeth in anger. He scolded himself in his heart for being so useless that he was completely controlled by a little girl. At the same time, he picked her up without any backbone. He seemed rough, but his movements were gentle as he held Gu Shengyin in his palm and asked, "Does it hurt?" Gu Shengyin meowed obediently and licked his finger with her soft tongue. The anger in Fang Yuhan's heart miraculously subsided. He sighed inwardly and stuffed Gu Shengyin into his pocket. Then, he turned around to deal with other matters. An Weiwei was still crying. Fang Yuhan ignored her. Instead, he squatted down and untied the little white cat. The little white cat was obviously frightened. The moment it regained its freedom, it quickly ran into the dense forest. There were no large beasts in the park, so there was no danger. Fang Yuhan only took a glance before he snapped back to reality. Then, only An Weiwei was left, sobbing softly. A teenage girl was squatting on the ground and crying. A tall adult man was standing in front of her coldly. No matter how one looked at it, it was a scene of an adult bullying a child. Unfortunately, at this time and place, no one appreciated An Weiwei's acting skills. Fang Yuhan was not in the mood to talk to An Weiwei. I will call your parents. If you have time to cry, you might as well think about how to explain it to them. An Weiwei's crying stopped abruptly. She widened her eyes and looked at Fang Yuhan. Uncle Fang, I know I was wrong. I don't know why I'm like this. I really don't know anything. She looked delicate and cute, and when she cried, she looked very lovable. Unfortunately, Fang Yuhan had a heart of stone. Apart from Princess Shirley, no other creature had ever enjoyed his tenderness. An Weiwei panicked. She knew that her grandparents liked her not only because she was their only granddaughter, but also because she was obedient and naive. As the elderly got older, they liked obedient and sensible grandchildren. If her grandmother knew that she actually had such a hobby, and that she had even given her grandmother's favorite Scottish fold to, An Weiwei shuddered. No. He absolutely could not admit it. I can't let this man tell them. She could say that he was spouting nonsense if it was someone else, but when it came to the words of the CEO of Fang Corporation, even her grandfather could not ignore it. Uncle Fang. Uncle Fang. She ran forward and tried to grab Fang Yuhan's clothes. However, Fang Yuhan didn't even want to look at her. He even took out his phone in front of An Weiwei and made a call. Hello, is this Mr. An Shumin? I am Fang Yuhan. It's like this. I realized. His voice was deep and cold as he recounted what he had seen and heard to An Weiwei's grandfather. Chapter 12:26. Fang Yuhan didn't turn on the speaker, so An Weiwei didn't know what the CEO of the Fang Corporation said to her grandfather. She just sat on the ground in a daze and looked at the knife in her hand. This was the knife that she was going to use on the white cat. Fang Yuhan's back was facing her. If she used this knife to make him unable to speak at this time, this thought became stronger and stronger. An Weiwei's hand couldn't help but reach for the hilt of the knife that was right in front of her. You're welcome. I just hope that you can control your family's younger generation. Don't regret it when the time comes. A small figure quietly approached him. If I were you, I would immediately put down the thing in my hand. The cold voice was very clear in the night. An Weiwei's figure paused. Suddenly, she sped up without hesitation and stabbed the knife in her hand towards the figure in front of her. Slap. Her arm was slapped hard. The sharp pain made her let go of her hand uncontrollably. Clang. A crisp sound of metal hitting the ground came from the ground. I warned you not to do stupid things. Fang Yuhan looked coldly at the teary-eyed person who was grabbing his arm. An Weiwei raised her head and looked at the man who was looking at her coldly. She could clearly see that the other party was looking at her with eyes full of mockery. She suddenly said softly, Is it easier to believe that an innocent and obedient little girl is a pervert who likes to abuse animals? Or is it easier to believe that a beautiful little girl who refuses to obey a criminal in the quiet of the night? Fang Yuhan stared at her and exhaled. Wouldn't it be better if you used your thoughts for proper purposes? An Weiwei didn't comment. Then, a clear female voice sounded in the silence. Uncle Fang, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. An Weiwei's eyes widened as she looked at Fang Yuhan in disbelief. Fang Yuhan turned off the recording and turned to leave. That's why I said, don't play tricks in front of me. You're still too inexperienced. An Weiwei looked at the back of the man who left and finally sat down dejectedly. It was over. Her image in the hearts of her grandparents must have been completely destroyed. Although the elderly cared about their granddaughter, she was not their only granddaughter. How many illegitimate children did her father raise outside? Those lowly things were always sharpening their heads to enter the An family's door. If they really wanted to give up on him, there were still many other options. Fang Yuhan didn't care about what An Weiwei was thinking. He didn't even care if she was safe in the forest at night. After experiencing such a thing, of course, he was not in the mood to take a stroll and enjoy the scenery. He directly took Gu Xingyin home. When he returned home, he sat on the sofa with a serious expression and took out the little white ball from his pocket. "Shirley, tell me, what are you?" He looked at Gu Xingyin sternly. He couldn't be blamed for thinking too much. Gu Xingyin's behavior today was too suspicious. Xue Li's previous behavior was as if she could predict the future and knew that An Weiwei was abusing the little white cat. How could a normal kitten be capable of such a miraculous feat? Chapter 12:27. Gu Xingyin looked at Fang Yuhan with her innocent eyes. She told herself that she was just a pure kitten. She didn't know anything. System, it felt like deja vu. Gu Xingyin, haha, every time I ask you a question, you pretend you don't know. Fang Yuhan looked at Gu Xingyin with a headache. He knew that she was pretending to be stupid, but he couldn't do anything to her. Fang Yuhan took a deep breath and told himself to calm down. He decided to use a flirting attack. His serious expression faded and became incomparably gentle. He looked deeply at the little white ball in front of him. Gu Xingyin could clearly see her figure in his eyes. Fang Yuhan said, "Xue Li, I don't care what kind of creature you are. I just hope that there's nothing to hide between the two of us. I, Fang Yuhan, will always support you." Gu Xingyin's eyes flashed. Hearing such words, it was impossible to say that she wasn't moved. Looking into the other party's eyes, she really wanted to open her mouth and tell him that she wasn't a cat, but a spiritual beast that didn't belong to this world. She was a lover who could take human form and be with him forever. She opened her mouth. Meh, then, she meowed. Fang Yuhan, Gu Xingyin expressed her innocence. She was just a cat now. How could he expect her to say human words? Fang Yuhan looked at Xue Li again and was sure that she wouldn't tell him anything. He sighed. Forget it. Since she didn't want to tell him, he wouldn't ask. One day, she would be willing to tell him everything. However, Fang Yuhan didn't know that the truth was too heavy for him to bear. In the following days, Gu Xingyin was still spoiled by Fang Yuhan like before. She ate, slept, and played every day. Her body instantly grew. Of course, her growing body referred to the strength in her body slowly increasing. Based on her appearance alone, she was still a palm-sized snow-white ball. Assistant Lu had become a die-hard fan of Princess Xue Li. Every few days, he would come to the CEO's house to help clean, cook, and feed the pets. That's right. In fact, his only goal was the last one above. The previous ones were all excuses to achieve his goal. Why would he need to do anything when the CEO only hired hourly cleaners to clean the house once a week? It couldn't be helped. Their CEO treasured Xue Li too much, and they could only watch. Every time Assistant Lu saw the little Princess Xue Li, she wanted to rush forward and put her in her pocket. But no matter how much he wanted to, as long as he saw his CEO's cold eyes, he would immediately be frightened. He couldn't afford to offend the CEO's parents. Assistant Lu was 100% sure that once he had any improper thoughts about Shirley, he would definitely be taught a lesson by his president. Gu Xingyin couldn't care less about what his assistant, who was smart and capable at work, was thinking in private. She was appreciating the lifes now. Ever since An Weiwei was brought back to the An family, who had received news about Fang Yuhan, did not neglect it. After a thorough cleaning and inspection of the entire villa and An Weiwei, the An family discovered something that left them flabbergasted. Chapter 12:28. In that small private room that almost no one had ever entered, there were countless bloody and shiny instruments. There were even many bloody and cruel photos. And these were all done by the most obedient and naive An Weiwei in their eyes. Not only did An Weiwei's grandmother, who was a Buddhist, faint on the spot, but the servants who usually worked in the villa started to look at An Weiwei with fear in their eyes as if they were looking at a lunatic. Wasn't she a lunatic? How could a normal person do such a thing? An Weiwei's grandparents left the villa that day. To be honest, if it weren't for the considerable salary here, the servants who worked here would have wanted to resign and leave. Just the thought of a little master with a twisted mind living here, and who knew how many dead animals were buried in this villa, made them break out in cold sweat. An Weiwei had been placed under house arrest in this villa. That's right, house arrest. Her family directly suspended her from school on the grounds that she was sick and quickly invited the most authoritative psychological expert in the country. This was done by An Weiwei's parents. They unanimously believed that their daughter had done such a thing because of a psychological problem. An Weiwei had no room to resist. Her status as a young lady in the An family was high, and it was all brought to her by her parents. Once the true ruler of the An family no longer liked her or even hated her, her life would no longer be so easy. Gu Xingyin sighed in her heart as she looked at An Weiwei's situation. She didn't feel that An Weiwei was pitiful at all. After all, no matter what happened to An Weiwei, it could be said that she reaped what she sowed. She just felt a little strange. Based on her understanding of Fang Yuhan, he actually let An Weiwei off so easily? This didn't seem like his style of doing things. After all, Gu Xingyin could completely feel how much he cared about her. Reality proved that Gu Xingyin's premonition was correct. Fang Yuhan indeed didn't intend to let An Weiwei off so easily. He thought about what she said that day. She had always been drooling over his Shirley. Did that mean that if he didn't take good care of Shirley one day, his Shirley might be placed on the perverted dissection table by that mentally twisted girl? How could Fang Yuhan tolerate something like this? He didn't take any action a few days ago just to let the An family relax their vigilance. As for An Weiwei's matter, regardless of whether it was for the sake of their reputation or because they hadn't given up on An Weiwei, the heir, they still kept it a secret from the outside world. Perhaps the An family did this for a reason. But Fang Yuhan didn't. He had no reason to let go of the person who wanted Shirley's life. Even if she was just a minor. Half a month was enough for a top-notch private investigator to find out everything he needed. Soon, news of the An family's heir, An Weiwei, suffering from a mental illness spread. Under Fang Yuhan's instructions, the public did not say that she was abusing animals. Instead, they emphasized that she was mentally ill. But how could such an obvious tyrannical animal be suppressed without emphasizing the news? In particular, countless people who liked small animals exploded on the internet after seeing those crazy photos. A little girl in her teens actually did such a cruel thing. This incident caused a huge commotion all over the country. Even An Group's shares had dropped to the lowest in the entire year because of this incident. Chapter 1229. Originally, An Weiwei's parents didn't have much feelings for this daughter of theirs. They had their own small families outside. In their own families, they had close lovers and obedient and sensible children. In their hearts, An Weiwei was just a mission. But now, she had caused the An family to fall into danger. This made An Weiwei's parents hate this daughter even more. Father An rushed back immediately. I told you that you're not a good person. Your grandmother even said that you're obedient, sensible, and kind-hearted. Humph, you're already so vicious at such a young age. You must have inherited that woman's bad intentions. Our An family doesn't have such a vicious bloodline. An Weiwei was half sitting on the bed as she listened to this so-called father yell at her. She was restricted to this room and was not allowed to go out. None of the servants who were usually kind and attentive to her dared to speak to her. What a joke. She thought to herself expressionlessly. If she didn't remember wrongly, how long had it been since this so-called father of hers returned home? Even on New Year's Eve, her parents would be out with their little lovers. Here, she was always alone. Seeing An Weiwei looking down and remaining silent, Father An became even angrier. I've already discussed with your grandfather and grandmother. We'll take away your inheritance rights in the An family. This villa will be my last gift to you as your father. Just stay here obediently. An Weiwei suddenly raised her head. She stared at Father An in disbelief. She was his biological daughter. Although she always knew that this father didn't like her, she never thought that he would be so ruthless. An Weiwei suddenly laughed out loud. Have you wanted to do this for a long time? Don't tell me it's because of this incident. I've long known that you and that woman see me as a thorn in your side. You've long wanted me to die so that you can make room for those lowly illegitimate children of yours outside, right? Slap. Father An slapped her with an ashen face. And Weiwei's expression didn't change. She looked at Father An with a vicious gaze. Am I right? Are you angry out of humiliation? Father An's face didn't look good. Although that was what he thought in his heart, having his junior say it out loud really made him lose face. Your grandmother is right. You have already gone mad. Otherwise, why would you do such a heartless thing and say such ungrateful words? Father An coldly snorted and left in a huff. And Weiwei sat on the bed with her head lowered. No one could see the bone-chilling coldness in her eyes. And Weiwei was expelled from school. And Weiwei was under house arrest. There was no one who didn't know An Weiwei's reputation. Everyone in the country knew about this cruel and perverted animal killer. And Weiwei was ruined. The police had been to Anne's house. However, the An family had to consider their reputation after all. If they had a daughter in the juvenile detention center, it would be a complete loss of face. Through their connections, they accused An Weiwei of being mentally unsound. Plus, she was underage. The police could only turn a blind eye and let An Weiwei stay in her own house. Being confined in such a small room every day, even if she didn't lack food and clothing, it was still unbearable for An Weiwei, right? Chapter 1230. That's right. Being under house arrest was indeed something that An Weiwei couldn't tolerate. However, it wasn't just because of the so-called loneliness that she couldn't tolerate. On the contrary, the loneliness of being alone was nothing to An Weiwei. What really tormented her was the desire for blood in her heart. She couldn't remember when she had fallen in love with the feeling of warm animal blood flowing on her hands. By the time she realized that she was addicted, she couldn't quit. Moreover, An Weiwei had never planned to quit. Why should she quit such a sweet and intoxicating feeling? She was like a drug addict. Only fresh blood could quench the thirst in her heart. But now, she had no way of getting what she wanted. The An family kept a close eye on her. After such a thing happened, An Weiwei's villa naturally attracted the attention of many forces. No matter what the reason was, the An family would never let An Weiwei out, much less allow her to harm animals again. An Weiwei's expression became gloomier and gloomier day by day, and her temper became more and more irritable day by day. She felt that if this continued, she would go crazy sooner or later. Little did she know that in the eyes of others, she was already a lunatic. The servants of the An family were the ones who could clearly feel the change in An Weiwei. It was precisely because of this that their fear of An Weiwei grew stronger. Even they began to think that Mr. An's claim that Miss was mentally ill wasn't an excuse to escape punishment. Miss, he really didn't look normal. Gu Xingyin felt that this wasn't enough. For a person like An Weiwei, no matter how cruel her treatment was, it wouldn't be too much. What she had done had harmed the lives of so many small animals. There was no way to offset such a sin. An Weiwei started to dream at night. In her dreams, there would always be small, bloody bodies staring at her with their eyes wide open. There were meows that haunted her for the entire night. No matter how she tried to escape, they followed her like a shadow, like a vengeful spirit demanding her life. She started to lose sleep and became nervous. Her hair fell out in large amounts, and her fair and rosy skin turned sallow because of lack of rest. The nightmares caused the girl's life force to rapidly wither. She finally couldn't take it anymore and said that evil spirits were pestering her every day. After all, she was a young lady. The servants also informed Father An, Mother An, and An Weiwei's grandparents. A doctor came over to take a look and said that An Weiwei's mental state was not good. Everything else was normal. He even said that she was under too much psychological pressure. An Weiwei naturally wouldn't believe such words. Every night, those cold and resentful gazes, those mournful voices demanding her life, were so real. They were cold and sticky as they entangled her for the entire night. It was those animals that had come to take his life. How could she have gotten it wrong? But no one believed her. The An family had already gotten impatient with the paranoid An Weiwei after inviting a doctor to check on her a few times and confirming that there was nothing wrong with her body. In their opinion, if An Weiwei wasn't under too much pressure, then she was doing it on purpose. She pretended to be weak so that they would let her out. However, the Yin family had already abandoned An Weiwei. How could they let her out? An Weiwei was crazy. Chapter 1231. When Gu Xingyin received this news, it was exactly 10 months after she had been in the body of the spiritual beast. According to the system, her childhood would be over in 2 months. At that time, she would be able to transform into a human. In fact, during this period of time, Gu Xingyin had also felt it. She could feel that her body was almost full of energy, and she urgently needed to find a breakthrough point. She reckoned that this breakthrough point would be the day she stepped into the growth stage. When she thought about the spiritual beast's mission in this world, Gu Xingyin's clear purple eyes dimmed slightly. If she remembered correctly, it was about 2 years later. During the 100th anniversary of this country's birth, the dragon vein was accidentally destroyed. There had to be a spiritual treasure that voluntarily gave up its cultivation and used its body to suppress the dragon vein and protect the country's 1,000 years of fortune. In this world, the people had long stopped believing in ghosts and gods. The spiritual energy was scarce, so it was naturally impossible for a spiritual treasure to be born. This was also the meaning of the spiritual beast's arrival in this world. In that case, she only had 2 years left to stay by Fang Yuhan's side. Instead of being separated by life and death, she might as well stay by his side and quietly be a cute little pet that could happily accompany each other for the next 2 years. However, Gu Xingyin had calculated everything, but she had overlooked An Weiwei's craziness. Another 2 months passed. Gu Xingyin had entered the most critical period. Every day, she could feel the spiritual power in her body on the verge of going out of control. She had to spend a lot of energy to stabilize the spiritual power in her body. In the outside world, Shirley, who had always been delicate and playful, became quiet. Fang Yuhan had been worried for a few days because of this. He was worried that Shirley was sick. However, the test results were normal. Could it be that cats also had times when they were emotional? Fang Yuhan looked at Shirley, who was lying quietly on the sofa, and was puzzled. If it was any other time, this little girl would have already pounced on him and rolled around in his arms. The next day, when Fang Yuhan went to work, he reached out to hug Gu Xingyin out of habit. However, she avoided him. Shirley? Fang Yuhan's brows furrowed tightly. He felt that something was very wrong. Gu Xingyin raised its head and meowed at him. Then, it turned over and closed its eyes, making a sleeping posture. Do you want to rest at home? Fang Yuhan immediately guessed what she meant. Gu Xingyin nodded and went forward to lick Fang Yuhan's outstretched finger. Fang Yuhan was still very worried. But he still nodded. Have a good rest. I'll ask Assistant Lu to bring you something to eat at noon. Gu Xingyin pulled itself together and meowed, indicating that it understood. Fang Yuhan went to work worriedly. As soon as he left, Gu Xingyin relaxed and laid down on the sofa. His body hurt. The uncontrollable spiritual energy was rampaging all over his body. It should be about to break through the juvenile stage and enter the adult stage. Gu Xingyin quickly looked around the house. This was not a good place to transform. She endured the pain and jumped off the sofa and walked to the door. The door opened silently in front of her, and the little white figure ran out. Gu Xingyin quickly thought of a place. This city was like a mountain, and there were many quiet places in the suburbs. It was perfect for her. Chapter 1232. Gu Xingyin went downstairs, but she didn't leave immediately. Instead, she went to the garage. There were quite a few cars in Fang Yuhan's garage. Gu Xingyin wasn't in the mood to study them, so she directly jumped into one of them. She didn't know how she did it. She was just squatting in the seat, but the driverless car actually started moving on its own. On the busy street, no one noticed that the silver-white Ferrari beside them was actually being driven by a little white beast. When they finally left the city, Gu Xingyin's gaze paused. It was as if the driver of this excellent Ferrari had changed gears, and it started to speed along the empty road. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 passing cars, but they would all stare dumbfoundedly as the Ferrari flashed past them like a bolt of silver lightning, disappearing in an instant. Cool. A young man wearing sunglasses looked on enviously. Gu Shengyin set off towards her destination. The spirit energy in her body was getting more and more out of control. She had to be faster, faster. It wasn't easy for her to find a place with the best spirit energy, so it should be helpful for her transformation. At this moment, the system suddenly spoke. Host, the mission objective has deviated from the original plot. Gu Shengyin reluctantly diverted a bit of her attention. What's wrong with An Weiwei? The system's tone was calm. An Weiwei suddenly went crazy. While the servants weren't paying attention, she went to the kitchen to steal a knife. She killed the 2 servants in charge of watching over her. Gu Shengyin was shocked. She turned to look at the system, her voice full of disbelief. Really? It was no wonder that Gu Shengyin was shocked. An Weiwei could be said to be the youngest mission target she had ever encountered. However, in terms of psychological distortion and bloodthirstiness, she was undoubtedly one of the highest. However, Gu Shengyin never thought that An Weiwei would dare to kill someone. The system reminded her. She's already gone crazy. This result was within the system's calculations. She was tortured by nightmares every day, and she had a guilty conscience. Even a mentally sound adult wouldn't be able to endure it. It would be strange if An Weiwei didn't have any problems. However, the system's purpose in reminding Gu Shengyin was, host, after detection, the mission target is also driving in the direction of the host's destination after killing someone. Gu Shengyin, ignoring the fact that An Weiwei, a teenage girl, knew how to drive, wasn't this coincidence a bit too much? Gu Shengyin knew that during the period of time when a spiritual beast's transformation was, their defenses were extremely weak. In other words, there was a period of time she was defenseless against the outside world. If that was the case, it would be dangerous if she was a lunatic. Gu Shengyin frowned. She should say, as expected of the mission target. She even cause the next moment, she's Lin, her teat, the entire car made a huge S shape on the spot, and the friction between the car and the ground made an ear-piercing sound. The system immediately took over the responsibility of driving. Looking at the host's current state, it was too late to choose a location. Forget it, it would try its best to prevent An Weiwei from discovering the host without being discovered by the world's laws. Under the system's invisible control, the Ferrari almost reached its maximum speed. When the silver-white car finally stopped, An Weiwei, who was still covered in blood, also ran in with a crazed expression on her face from a place not far from here. There are 4 more updates today, before midnight. Mua S. Asking for a vote, a tip, a mua. This world shouldn't end today. It should end tomorrow. Next story, I'm not saying, cold face. Chapter 1233. Gu Shengyin was barely able to maintain a trace of clarity as she ran to the place she had chosen. At first glance, this place looked very ordinary. It was just a small hill full of grass. It couldn't even be called a beautiful scenery. But in Gu Shengyin's eyes, the spiritual energy in the entire mountain was most concentrated in this place. If there were cultivators here, they would be able to see that the spiritual energy here had even formed a faint milky white fog. The spiritual energy had turned into fog, which meant that the concentration of spiritual energy here was at least average. If this place was in the cultivation world, it wouldn't be considered much. But in this world, it was already 1 in a million, at least. Gu Shengyin couldn't find a place in the entire central and southern region that had spiritual energy comparable to this place. Gu Shengyin didn't make any complicated movements. She just lay there quietly, as if she was taking a nap while basking in the sun on a normal day. But at this moment, in the eyes of the only spectator, the system, it could clearly see that the fog-like spiritual energy seemed to be following some predetermined path as it swarmed towards Gu Shengyin's small body. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. A white light flashed on the system's body. An Weiwei was coming this way. At this moment, An Weiwei no longer looked like a delicate young miss. Her hair was dry and messy. There were bloodstains on her wrinkled clothes, and she was still holding a watermelon knife tightly in her hand. The strangest thing was her gaze. It was panicked, nervous, distorted, and carried a trace of madness. This was definitely not the gaze a normal person should have. At this moment, she was walking aimlessly. But in the eyes of the system, it could clearly see that her messy footsteps were slowly approaching Gu Xingyin. The host was now at a critical stage, and Weiwei was currently in a state where she had lost all rationality. It couldn't let her get close to the host. The white light on the system's body flashed even more urgently. And Weiwei, who was walking forward in a daze, suddenly felt her vision go dark. She stopped in her tracks. Because she realized that she had arrived at a strange place. It was too quiet here. The chirping of insects and birds that were still ringing in her ears just now were all gone. She couldn't even hear her own footsteps. It was also excessively dark here. And Weiwei felt that her eyes had lost their usefulness. This was because everything that she could see had turned into untouchable darkness. And Weiwei, who had been tormented by nightmares for an entire month, suddenly felt her heart skip a beat. A bad premonition surged in her heart, and it turned into a display in the next moment. Suddenly, a bloody figure appeared in the dark void. It was a tabby cat. The skin on its body had already been peeled off, revealing the white meat inside, mixed with bright red blood. The blood on his body was still dripping down. And Weiwei heard this voice clearly. Tick tick, it was the sound of blood splashing on the ground. Then, she saw the eyes of the dead tabby cat start to move. Her resentful gaze locked onto him. The bloody figure in the air walked towards Weiwei step by step, as if there was a path beneath it. Ah, and Weiwei finally couldn't help but scream. She held the knife tightly in her hand and couldn't help but retreat. Chapter 1234. However, her retreating footsteps were quickly stopped by something. Because her back bumped into something. Clearly, there was nothing behind her. And Weiwei took a deep breath and turned her head. A puppy hung upside down in the air. Its limbs were twisted, and its eyes were dug out. It was staring at Weiwei with its blood-red and empty eye sockets. Ah! A shrill voice pierced the sky. The system looked at Weiwei, who was spinning around in panic, and watched her walk away under its guidance. It was relieved. It continued to pay attention to its host's condition. Fang Yuhan had been absent-minded all day. His mind was filled with the image of Shirley's weak appearance this morning. He didn't know how Shirley was doing. His phone suddenly rang. It was Assistant Lu, who he had asked to bring lunch for Shirley. President, Shirley isn't at home. Assistant Lu's anxious voice came from the phone. What did you say? Fang Yuhan suddenly stood up. He didn't bother with the documents on his computer. Instead, he got up and drove home. As soon as he got out of the car, he noticed that one of his cars was missing. The house was very clean. Obviously, a thief hadn't broken in. Fang Yuhan glanced at the room and dialed a number on his phone. Hello, I need to check. Yes, Longpan Mountain in the suburbs. Thank you. Assistant Lu looked at her president in confusion. You stay here. If Shirley sneaks out to play, remember to call me when she comes back. Assistant Lu nodded and said, no problem. Fang Yuhan didn't waste any time. He drove straight to the location provided by the other party. Longpan Mountain was such a remote suburb. How did his car end up there? He had many questions in his mind, but none of them were as important as finding Shirley. He didn't even care if he ran a red light. Fang Yuhan felt as if his heart was being squeezed tightly by something, and he couldn't breathe. Shirley would be fine. She would be fine. He comforted himself. Such strong and intense emotions had long surpassed the feelings he had for a pet. Fang Yuhan only spent an hour on the 1.5-hour drive to get there. The car stopped outside Longpan Mountain, and he soon saw a familiar silver-white sports car. But there was no one inside. At a time like this, he should have called the police immediately. But for some reason, a strange feeling welled up in his heart. She told him that there was no need to call the police and that he would go into the mountains to find what he was looking for. Fang Yuhan had never had such a strong sixth sense before. He listened to his heart and slowly walked towards that part of his heart. The system, which was paying attention to the host, quickly sensed that someone had arrived. The system felt a little helpless. It knew what its host was thinking, and it was obvious that she didn't want her lover to see anything unnecessary. The system hesitated for a moment, but still decided to try and stop him. It was still the same method he used to stop An Weiwei, an illusion. However, Fang Yuhan, who was under the illusion created by the system, did not seem to see anything. He walked straight towards the direction that was guiding him. Sensing that he was getting closer and closer, the system felt helpless. It looked at its host and said apologetically, "It's not that we didn't do anything. It's just that Uncle Duan is too powerful. Host, you'd better think about how you're going to explain this." Chapter 1235. As Fang Yuhan walked, he felt that something was wrong. He looked around him. It was clearly an ordinary place, but it strangely made his body and mind light up. It was as if his entire body had been cleansed by something invisible. He did not know that this was because the spirit energy here was so strong that it could be sensed. However, ordinary people did not understand this. They simply felt that the air here was extra fresh, and people would feel very comfortable staying here. For example, some famous natural places were known to have good mountains, water, and air. When tourists went to those places, they could experience a comfort that they could not experience in the city. In fact, it was not the air that made them feel comfortable. What made them feel comfortable was the spirit energy contained in the ancient trees and springs that had been around for thousands of years. Fang Yuhan continued to walk forward until he reached a small hill. He stopped in his tracks. The feeling in his heart grew even stronger. Fang Yuhan seemed to have an answer. He walked towards the hillside in 2 quick steps. As expected, he saw the little white ball lying quietly on the grass on the other side of the hill. The grass was tender and green, and Shirley's small snow-white body looked extra beautiful. Fang Yuhan was about to walk over when he suddenly stopped. He could see Shirley's fluffy tail sweeping from time to time. It seemed that she was fine. It was still the same intuition as before. His intuition told him that he should not disturb Shirley. Fang Yuhan did not understand why his little white dumpling was lying there and basking in the sun, but he still stopped in his tracks. After all, it was this seemingly unreliable intuition that allowed him to find Shirley so easily. Fang Yuhan had no choice but to stop and look at Shirley silently. Seeing that Shirley was safe and sound, Fang Yuhan's heart calmed down. The questions that he had thrown to the back of his mind reappeared in his mind. The car in his garage did not show any signs of being stolen. How did she get here? He had checked the doors and windows before he went out. How did Shirley get out? Also, how did Shirley get here? Why was there no trace of an outsider here? Shirley, just who was she? All these things made Fang Yuhan feel incredulous. He subconsciously looked at Shirley, who was not far in front of him. When he saw it, he was stunned for a moment. Because in his eyes, the little white ball lying on the ground was emitting a white light, just like what was described in a fantasy novel. Fang Yuhan blinked several times to make sure that he wasn't seeing things. But what was even more shocking was yet to come. As the white light dispersed, the small white ball suddenly began to stretch. Slowly, it condensed into the shape of a human. The light gradually dissipated, revealing the figure in front of Fang Yuhan. She had snow-white hair and an exquisite and perfect jade-like face. It was hard to tell what kind of fabric she was wearing, but the shape of her clothes was similar to the wide-sleeved robes worn by humans in ancient times. This fairy-like girl lay defenseless in front of Fang Yuhan. The calmness that Fang Yuhan had always prided himself on had completely disappeared. He felt that his worldview had been impacted. Just now, he had been here, watching helplessly. He watched as a cat turned into a human. Chapter 1236. Before Fang Yuhan could recover from his shock, the girl lying on the ground's long, snow-white eyelashes fluttered gently. It was obvious that she was about to wake up. Fang Yuhan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He became inexplicably nervous as he held his breath and stared unblinkingly at the girl who seemed to be his Shirley. Gu Xingyin slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was the clear blue sky. She raised her hand and was satisfied to see that her claws had turned into human palms. She propped herself up with her hands and sat up on the ground. Then, she looked at Fang Yuhan, who was looking at her with a complicated expression. Gu Xingyin. System, come out and explain. The system really did explain. It sent a long string of information directly into Gu Xingyin's mind and admitted that it couldn't stop Fang Yuhan. Gu Xingyin sighed. She had kept it a secret for so long, but he still found out. Fang Yuhan looked at her dark purple eyes, which were similar to Shirley's. For some reason, his heart suddenly calmed down. Shirley? He called out to Gu Xingyin tentatively. Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment before she opened her mouth and meowed. Gu Xingyin. She couldn't help it. God, how embarrassing. Fang Yuhan. It was really strange to see such a big person meowing like a cat. However, Shirley was also cute like this. With this, the sense of unfamiliarity in his heart instantly dissipated. Fang Yuhan reached out his hand to Gu Xingyin and smiled. Come, let's go home. Gu Xingyin did not move. Fang Yuhan's eyebrows twitched, but he still maintained his smile. His right hand was still stretched out in her direction, as if he would never let go until he achieved his goal. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. After a long time, she finally raised her head. She walked over to Fang Yuhan and gently placed her hand in his. Fang Yuhan's hand was warm. Gu Xingyin thought. Fang Yuhan was intrigued. He actually took the initiative to reach out and hold someone else's hand? And it was a girl. If he was seen by Assistant Lu, he would definitely show a stupid face again. However, when Fang Yuhan thought about how this was his Shirley, he felt that it was natural. Surely, we've already kissed, hugged, and raised each other up high. What's there to be afraid of? As he thought about it, Fang Yuhan felt his face heat up. When Shirley was still a little white ball, she didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But now, she had become a human, ahem. Fang Yuhan cleared his throat and interrupted the messy thoughts in his mind. He said to Gu Xingyin, Shirley, you should know that we humans, he pointed at himself. We all have black hair and black eyes. You look a little. Before he could finish his sentence, he saw that the other party's hair and eyelashes had turned into the same black color as his own, as if by magic. Her face was still as exquisite as before, but she didn't seem to be filled with immortal energy like before. Gu Xingyin turned her head and smiled at him. Is this okay? In her eyes, there was a clear and undisguised intimacy. Fang Yuhan suddenly felt his heart soften, as if it was filled with a warm and clear hot spring. Chapter 1237. Fang Yuhan smiled. He reached out and gently stroked Gu Xingyin's soft hair. It was as if he was stroking her hair when she was still a little white ball. Yes, my Shweli is the prettiest. He held Gu Xingyin's hand and walked back. He still had many questions in his heart, but at this moment, he only wanted to do one thing, hold this girl's hand and bring her home. Ah, the two of them suddenly stopped in their tracks. There was a figure in front of them blocking their way. It was a little girl with messy clothes. Her hair was disheveled, and she walked around aimlessly. It's her? Fang Yuhan frowned. He still had some impression of An Weiwei. Of course, it wasn't a good impression. If he remembered correctly, this young lady from the An family should have been forcefully imprisoned in the villa by the An family because of her mental illness. Why did she suddenly appear here? Moreover, Fang Yuhan looked at her blood-stained dress and the sharp knife in her hand. Her expression was deranged. No matter how he looked at it, she didn't look like a normal person. At this moment, Fang Yuhan didn't know that An Weiwei's hands were stained with human lives. Could it be that the An family wasn't looking for an excuse? Was An Weiwei really crazy? Looking at her appearance, Fang Yuhan tightened his grip on the hand of the person beside him. He took out his phone and called the police. Let's go, he said to Gu Xingyin. The two of them took a detour and distanced themselves from An Weiwei. Actually, An Weiwei couldn't see them at all. She was still immersed in her dark world filled with hatred and blood. Fang Yuhan and Gu Xingyin didn't walk slowly. Soon, they left An Weiwei far behind. Then, Gu Xingyin saw the Ferrari that she had driven out of Fang Yuhan's garage in a hurry. She lowered her head guiltily. After witnessing Gu Xingyin's transformation from a beast to a human, Fang Yuhan had a rough idea of how she had left the house and how her car had suddenly arrived at this place. Gu Xingyin knew that he would ask her, but Fang Yuhan did not say anything as he pulled her into his car. Gu Xingyin turned her head to take a look. Finally, she whispered, "That car." The corners of Fang Yuhan's lips curled up slightly. He was clearly in a good mood. "It's fine. I've already made a call. The insurance company will send someone to drive it back." Gu Xingyin opened her mouth but did not say anything. She thought that after such a strange thing happened to her, the other party would definitely ask her about it immediately. She hadn't thought of how to answer him. However, Fang Yuhan didn't take the normal path and didn't ask anything. This made her even more nervous. No one knew what he was thinking. In contrast to her uneasiness, Fang Yuhan was very calm. He even asked her if she wanted to drink some water. Gu Xingyin didn't feel thirsty, so she shook her head and refused. This transformation had consumed a lot of Gu Xingyin's energy. She opened her eyes and looked at the scenery in front of her. As she looked, she felt a little sleepy. She was surrounded by a familiar and reliable aura. She closed her eyes and fell asleep. Fang Yuhan, who had been paying attention to her, slowed down the car. Soothing light music also played in the car. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who had fallen into a deep sleep, and his eyes were filled with gentleness. Chapter 1238. Gu Xingyin was woken up by Fang Yuhan. She opened her eyes in a daze and looked out of the window. She found that they had arrived at the parking lot downstairs. She was still a little confused. She rubbed her eyes, opened the car door, and walked out. Fang Yuhan naturally held her hand, and the two of them entered the elevator. Gu Xingyin looked at their intertwined hands and whispered, "Isn't it inappropriate for us to do this?" Fang Yuhan knew what she was referring to, but he pretended not to know and asked, "What about us?" Gu Xingyin, this person was definitely not the cold and gentle CEO of the Fang Corporation that she knew. She stretched out her free hand and pointed to their intertwined hands. Fang Yuhan looked at her, and his expression suddenly became lonely. "In the past, Shirley used to lie on my shoulder or in my palm. Now, you don't even want to hold my hand?" Gu Xingyin, I'm speechless. You're a big CEO. Why do you have to make such a bitter expression? But, damn it. I actually fell for it. Hence, Gu Xingyin shut his mouth and did not say another word. Of course, she did not withdraw her hand from his. Fang Yuhan laughed silently in his heart. The elevator soon arrived at the floor where Fang Yuhan's house was located. Fang Yuhan pressed the doorbell. The door was quickly opened. Assistant Lu, who had been waiting at home, immediately asked when he saw him. "Mr. President, have you found Shirley?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Gu Xingyin behind Fang Yuhan. What a beautiful girl. This was Assistant Lu's first thought. He glanced at Gu Xingyin in shock and then looked down. He happened to see his CEO and Gu Xingyin's tightly intertwined hands. Assistant Lu, he rubbed his glasses hard. He was right. His CEO was holding a girl's hand. Before Assistant Lu recovered from this event that refreshed her cognition, she heard the cold voice of her president in her ears. "Have you seen enough? If you have, then let us in." Assistant Lu, only then did he regain his senses and realize that he was alone at the door. As for his CEO and that unbelievably beautiful young lady, he had been keeping them outside the door since just now. Like a cat whose tail was stepped on, Assistant Lu jumped up at once. He hurriedly stepped aside to let his boss in. Then, his mind, which had been occupied by shock, finally began to operate freely, and he remembered what he had to do. "By the way, President, how is Shweli?" Assistant Lu followed them and asked. Fang Yuhan turned his head and glanced at Gu Xingyin, who was obediently following beside him. The corners of his lips curled up slightly. I've already found it. Assistant Lu was relieved and said, it's good that you found her. Shirley is so beautiful and delicate. If she was targeted by some criminals outside, she would suffer a lot. His tone was sincere, and it was clear that he was truly worried about Shirley. Gu Xingyin felt warm in her heart. She turned to Assistant Lu and said with a smile, don't worry. Shirley is fine. Her voice was clear and crisp, like the first cry of a newborn oriole. It was extremely pleasant to the ear. Assistant Lu was first shocked by her appearance, and now he was captivated by her voice. He thought to himself that Fang Yuhan deserved to be his CEO. Fang Yuhan usually looked cold and indifferent. Did he really think that his CEO was not interested in women? Now it seemed that he had set his sights too high. Chapter 1239. Although Assistant Lu had a girlfriend, she still blushed in the face of such a beautiful woman. The next second, he received a warning look from his boss. Assistant Lu, Fang Yuhan was unhappy. Hearing Assistant Lu's nagging to express her care for Shirley, Su Yuning looked at Assistant Lu with a much softer look. If he didn't know that Assistant Lu couldn't know Shirley's real identity, he would have jumped up and scolded her. Fang Yuhan felt that Assistant Lu was unnecessary here. He glanced at Assistant Lu and said, if I remember correctly, you said that you would have a candlelight dinner with your girlfriend tonight. Assistant Lu paused for a moment. Yes, he had planned to have a romantic candlelight dinner with his girlfriend tonight, and then he would have a more beautiful night by the way. However, the boss called him and asked him to come over. Assistant Lu wasn't sure if he could make it back in time. He had already sent a text message to his girlfriend to apologize. She hadn't replied to him until now. Obviously, she was a little angry. Hearing the boss's words, Assistant Lu thought for a while and suddenly understood what the boss meant. Since Shirley was fine, and the boss had brought such a beautiful woman home, wasn't it unnecessary for him to stay here? He raised his hand and looked at his watch. It was 4:00 in the afternoon. He could still make it. Assistant Lu was instantly full of energy and said to Fang Yuhan, boss, since Princess Shirley is fine, I'm relieved. I have to go back to the company to sort out some documents. I can't stay here any longer. As soon as he finished speaking, he received a look of approval from his boss. Fang Yuhan said slowly, for a diligent employee like Assistant Lu, her year-end bonus should be increased. Assistant Lu was overjoyed. Without further delay, he got up and left. Once again, only Gu Xingyin and Fang Yuhan were left in the room. Fang Yuhan slowly leaned forward and looked at Gu Xingyin without blinking. All right, now that it's quiet and no one is disturbing us, can you explain it to me? Surely. Finally, he came. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. If Fang Yuhan hadn't asked her, she would have been worried. In fact, ever since she got into the car, she had been thinking about how to break the news to Fang Yuhan. Along the way, she had already made her decision. Gu Xingyin turned to look at Fang Yuhan. Just as she was about to speak, Fang Yuhan spoke first. I hope you can tell me the truth, Shirley. Gu Xingyin smiled. I never intended to hide it from you. She began to say that she was a spiritual beast. Her first memory was when she came to this world and was brought back by Fang Yuhan, bit by bit. Other than the final outcome of the spiritual beast, she had told Fang Yuhan everything. However, Fang Yuhan frowned. His intuition told him that Shirley wasn't lying to him. But she was definitely hiding something from him. Intuition was a very mysterious thing. However, both times, his intuition about Shirley had been surprisingly accurate, so Fang Yuhan had no choice but to believe it. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who was sitting opposite him on the sofa, indicating that she had said everything. He said with certainty, "You're still hiding something from me." Gu Xingyin, how did you know? She quickly asked the system. Did Fang Yuhan also cheat?